collect data. Citizens expect governments to do things using location. Because on our smartphones, we all use apps like Kareem, like Booking.com, that absolutely rely on geospatial data and location in order to function. So citizens expect the same sort of ways of doing e-government services, the same sort of pictorial basis, mapping basis, using location. I'll give you some examples from the UK in this case. So e-government understanding where flooding might happen tomorrow by combining data from many sources, predictions for rain, environmental agency, sort of flooding likelihood statistics and so on. We can predict where flooding will happen, and then the local authorities can help those citizens that are unable to move themselves and move them out the way of the flooding before the flooding occurs. That saves lives. That's an example. Land administration, an absolutely fundamental part of government. It's geospatial. What is the exact plot that someone owns? That is another use of location data. We heard this morning about why tell many different departments about an event in life. So in UK, Tell Us Once is in a service that after bereavement, you report it once and automatically all those other government departments' databases are updated. City planning portals, enabling the citizen to have a say in what is happening in the planning processes in their municipalities. And if they don't like it, perhaps to register an objection. The United Nations has an e-government survey. Some of you will have seen this. And in amongst there are all sorts of information, but there's a list of different services. This is an extract from the list. Well, actually, I would argue that from that list, a large percentage need geospatial data in order to operate properly. Because that where question, where someone lives, where they might choose to go to school, requires that foundation data. And then when we're planning a 5G infrastructure, for example, which actually you need to know where the trees are, where the lampposts are, it needs a different level of geospatial data, foundation data, to enable the most efficient planning of 5G infrastructure. But that same geospatial data that's used for e-government is absolutely critical to the economy. This is a study done for the Minister of Finance in UK. $8 to $14 billion a year could be driven in the private sector by using geospatial data and geospatial techniques. So it's not just data for e-government, it's data to create wealth.
Final minute.
Okay, that's fine. And here in Saudi Arabia, the General Commission for Survey has commissioned the World Bank to conduct a study looking at the value that could be accrued for this country from using geospatial data. And that same geospatial data can drive and feed the fourth industrial revolution, the new tech industries that we're all keen to start up in our countries, modeling, simulation, so on and so forth. So it's not just data for e-government, it's data that supports the nation going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Fascinating. I've been doing a lot of work with Mead and some of our projects company partners talking about digital twins in the project space. So I want to ask you some questions about that. But we can't. We must go to the next speaker. So our next speaker, actually, before I come to you, 1 second. I just want to say I prefer to have questions from the floor asked out loud with a microphone because it's more engaging for everyone. But if you are shy, you can send questions using the Slido app, which I've mentioned a few times today. If you have Slido on your phone, you can download the app onto your phone and then use the hashtag A for Alpha 868, and that takes you to this conference. And you can send questions. They'll come up on this tablet, and we can discuss them. Anyway, that's for after the presentations. Our next presenter is Ott Vatter. Now, Ott is the Managing Director of e-Residency Services in Estonia, so our second Baltic state of the day. So you must be doing something right. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here yet again. I'm going to do something unusual, so I will not have any pictures here, so you can focus on me. I will try out this presentation style and see if you actually remember something that I say, not just the pretty pictures that I usually show. So, data, let's talk about data. Data is crucial in making decisions. We need data-based decisions, otherwise they're quite useless. So, for example, we in Estonia need to actually prevent the disease of our elderly. So we have a majority of an elderly population, and we would like them to actually hear what kind of health risks they will have before they will actually happen. So, for example, we have an e-prescription system or e-healthcare system using a digital identity that you can get all of your prescribed prescriptions from the pharmacy using your identity. I brought the ambulance example before, so same example for the fire department. For example, when you have a fire and you're injured, I would like the hospital to already know the information in advance, so that the likelihood of my survival would be greater. You have to keep this data safe. We have to have trust in our government. So we have a law in Estonia, for example, when someone who hasn't got the right to look at your data, so for example, a medical employee or a police officer, and they do not have the legal basis to actually look who you are or look at your data, then this is a very serious offense and the license will be taken away. So data integrity is essential. We guarantee our data using the keyless signature infrastructure built on blockchain in Estonia. I think the user-centric government is the future, and it cannot be that you do not know your users. You have to constantly learn from your users, and I think the example what my colleague from Russia brought out, that you have these public forums where actually people can give their opinion. So you have to make their voices heard, otherwise there is no point in the data, so you have to analyze the data. And as I mentioned before, governments are competing for the best citizens. So it is natural. It's like a private company. And governments are usually bad compared to private companies in providing services. So let's make more use of the data we have, because we have more of it. Let's give people the trust for the data, and let's make better informed decisions. Thank you.
Oh. Well done, Ott. That was a record for the day. I want to ask you, actually, we're not going into Q&A yet, but you've put that central position of data. In fact, all of our speakers have. I still worry about the quality of data, but maybe three of you nodded your head there, so that's something we can come back to in the Q&A. So get your questions in your minds. Get ready to ask this panel about data and data analytics. But before we do, we have one more presentation. So thank you for your patience, Bassem. Bassem Al-Jadai, he's the Vice President of Innovation and Digital Capability at YASER, the e-government program of Saudi Arabia.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Excuse me, I'm going to do this in English. Your Excellencies, حياكم الله جميعا. Thank you everybody for coming. I'm going to talk today, I only have 5 minutes, and I'm going to talk today about KSA Big Data and Open Data Strategy. And just a heads up, this is not an approved strategy yet, but I would love to share it with all of you guys and get the questions about it and share it with my panelists here and talk to the people. So, let's get it quickly. The context here is we have a vision. We have a very ambitious vision, and a key enabler for that vision is data. Leveraging the data, if I want to do with emerging technology, I'm a VP of innovation. Emerging technology is one of the areas that I look at, and without data, I cannot do anything. We cannot innovate without data. So, Industry 4.0 is about data. IoT cannot work without data and 5G, connectivity and data. When we talk about future of government, if I want to give, and I think my colleagues here, Jane, Out, have already talked about that, if I want a better services for my citizens, I need to know them. I need to have a full public profile about my citizens. I need to know what are their needs and what they want. What are their evaluations of my services? All of that is data. So, quickly, open and big data is two terms, but actually they are not contradicting, they are the same. Open data could be a big data, and a big data is a huge amount of data. So if I want to identify that, I need to know what are my pillars. I want to improve business environment. I want to foster SMEs. I want to embracing transparency, engaging everyone, attracting talent. These are the pillars that I want to look at, the things that are my benefits from fostering this. So if I have that, I want to talk about the indices. We don't look at indices just to improve them. We look at indices to measure our performance against others. So if I want to get these benefits, which all these indices are looking at and measuring me about, I will get these benefits if I do the right thing. So what the future, what I want to see, what I want to be. I want to quantify, for example, if I talk about healthcare, I want patients to track their health in real time. Data is there, it exists. Why patient cannot track their health in real time? I want personalized messages for Riyadh Metro, for example. I want, for example, if I say like there is Alia is an entrepreneur and living in Jeddah, and she wants to start an enterprise, she can go to data.gov.sa and start her startup using our open data platform. So all of these is what we ambition as a future of doing this. So the pillars, the strategic pillars we are putting our strategy on is starting from bottom to up. We need to build, which is the build foundation of data. Then we need to nurture the capability of data. We need to build the big capability, and then we need to innovate with this data. So build, nurture, innovate. After we looked at what do we need to focus and what we're going to do, because we want to help SMEs, we want to focus on innovation, because especially in open data, you need to choose one of two. Either you focus on transparency or you focus on innovation.
1 minute.
Okay. And last slide, no problem. So we choose to focus on innovation at the beginning, and then we're going to focus on transparency. After that, we will reach what we call an open data government. So if we want to focus on innovation, transportation and logistics, data is key. Energy and water, health, tourism, culture, and entertainment. Opening all of this data and using all of this data in our big data platforms will give us the benefits that we want, and the one that I talked at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Well done. Thank you very much, Bassem, and thank you to all of the panelists, because I know that each one of you has a huge area to talk about, and you've been given just 5 minutes. So we have half an hour, or maybe just less than half an hour for questions. It's difficult for me to see with the lights on, so if you can raise your hand very clearly if you have a question, and we'll bring the microphone to you. Or if you don't want to talk out loud in public, use the Slido app to send your question, and we'll receive it here. Okay, I can't see any hands, so that means I can get to ask some questions. I'm going to start, Jane, with you. I had three.
There is a hand here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where is the hand? I apologize. If we can have the microphone into the front row, please.
Thank you.
If you can say your name and your organization as well. Thank you.
Sure. So my name is Mohammed Al-Hussein from Muzan, and my question is to Bassem. I think it's really exciting that we're embracing open data. Open data is something that we hear a lot about. It's very useful. And to see that Yasser is kind of embracing that in their future plans, it's definitely critical and important, I think. But the question I have is, there's a misconception between open data and aggregate data. So when you talk to a lot of organizations and you see kind of what's being published, and you look at it, eventually it's aggregate, which kind of limits its usefulness. And of course, one reason for people to have aggregate data is that maybe they don't have a very clear policy on what to publish versus what not to publish. But I think the effect of having aggregate data, it kind of discourages people to, think of it as a useful.
Sorry, can I just ask,
Sure.
it's my ignorance, what do you mean by aggregate data?
So aggregate data, so for example, when you say open data, you usually want like raw data. Maybe it's sanitized, maybe it's anonymized, but you want it on a record level where you can get a lot of information, as opposed to aggregate data where you get just the sum of the data, which kind of limits its usefulness. So there are experiences from different countries to where aggregate data is being published versus kind of raw data. And the more the data is raw, the more useful it is. So, and I'm sure Bassem is kind of, so if you can just give us your take on this. Thank you.
First of all, I thank you for the question. I totally agree with you. This is one of the challenges we are facing today in Saudi Arabia. That most of government agencies and semi-government agencies who are sharing their data in the open data platform, they share aggregate data. Some of them put a cause as for security reasons, a lot of reasons, and that basically, this is if you look at the pillars we talk about, we said at the beginning we need to build the foundation. And then we need to focus on the data capability, where we need to go and spread the word. Currently, and yes, this is what we do. We have a dedicated team for open data who go and support government agencies on educating them about what is open data and just make them sure that there is no risks whatsoever of publishing open data, because it's open data. It's one of the classifications, if data is open, that means it's shareable. It needs to be used. Open data has some characteristics as per the Open Data Charter, where data have to be on the raw. It could be anonymized, synthesized, whatever you need to do with the data just to wipe in any identity or any way to identify the person. And it's not that difficult. The problem we found with every government agency is they don't have a data management framework. They actually don't know what they have assets as data. They don't know their data. They don't know what is open, what is not open. This is why we start working with the National Cybersecurity Authority and publishing a guideline about classifying the data between what is open and what is not open.
So does there need to be some kind of auditing organization, or if you're collecting data and you want to differentiate between raw data and aggregated data?
No, basically, the concept here is why we want the data to come. Why we need to publish our data. We are publishing our data to create a full cycle of digital economy and embrace the transparency. If I want entrepreneurs to go and start businesses, if I want the businesses to use this data and create added value services, then I have to publish raw data. Take an example. If I have schools today, if I want to publish all the schools in Riyadh, what's happened is Ministry of Education will publish 400, 500 schools. That's it, as a one record. And that's benefit nobody. What we need is all the schools, geolocations of these schools, size of the schools, how many students there, what the grades of these students, but I don't know the name. I don't need to know the names.
Okay.
That's when we talk about aggregates, we get one record. When we talk about raw data, we'll get thousands of data where added value services and data scientists can create multiple benefits out of it.
Okay, thank you. Jane, if I can bring you in on this.
So thank you for the question, because it perfectly teed up discussion of the framework that I laid out, where the first step, I think, is publish, and then you get to polish. And when we publish data, we publish what we have. And typically what we have isn't perfect. And we don't know that until we publish it, because it might be what I had in my file drawer, and I thought it was just fine, until other people told me it was confusing, or maybe inaccurate, right? Any data entry is going to have at least a 13% error in the finest quality organizations. So there's going to be inaccuracies, there's going to be problems.
So did you say 13% error?
13% is the typical error rate of data entry in across industries. And
so out of every 100 pieces of data that are typically input into a database, 13 of them will be wrong?
Well, missing, inaccurate, transposed. So there's a lot of missing data in a typical government data set, in any data set. I mean, anyone here who's looked at a data set, there are inaccurate and missing values. In fact, most data scientists tell me they spend 80, 85, 95% of their time cleaning the data. But to this point of getting raw data, it often takes a while for the person who published the data to realize that it's not all that helpful to put out a PDF, right? You put out a PDF of aggregate data. The person who puts it out thought it was great. You have to give them the feedback that says, no, I don't want the summary statistic. I want to know the breakdown. I don't want a PDF. I want an Excel file or some kind of source data that I can work with. And my term for PDF is pretty darn frustrating, right? Because we can't use it to do analytics. So I think that the challenge that you raised, which is open data isn't always useful, I think it is a useful first step, right? It's how we get to the next step of having better data, and then even better, and more data. And the more high-quality data we have, the better we are.
John, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, and I would agree with what Jane is saying, but I want to just pick on the open data very briefly, because there's often this cry that open data means release all this data for free and so on and so forth. We've got to remember that business models need to allow for that data to be properly maintained, to be of the right quality, and to be accessible, and so on and so forth. And that includes the currency of the data. But I just want to touch a little on what's happening in UK in our organisation, Ordnance Survey, where we have a database with, let's say, 500 million features, but we don't allow people access to that database. We provide products and services that we generate automatically from that database. So what we're doing now is investigating how we might allow people access to the raw data so that they can then generate different value that we can't necessarily think of. So we are definitely looking to see how that might be done. The other side to that coin, though, is we cannot think about how people might use the data. They will think on it, but we can help them use that data. We understand it. So we have a role as a government agency to help others use our data to best effect, whether they're startup businesses, government departments, or big industry. And that role is really important, I think.
Okay, thank you. Great question. Thank you for that. And fantastic depth of responses from the panelists. Thank you. Now we have a second question. If you could say who you are and your organization, please.
سأتكلم باللغة العربية.
تفضل.
طيب. أنا عبد الله الصليلي مدير معهد كادر السعودية. نحن الآن نعد برامج تدريبية في البيج داتا واقتصاد المعرفة حتى نتوافق مع رؤية المملكة وأكبر تتحول المملكة. أنا ما أرجو من ضيوفك أنه يذكروا لنا تجارب أو أفضل ممارسات تدريب الأطفال أو الشباب أو كبار السن أو المواطنين على البيج داتا وعلى يعني الاستفادة من البرامج والبيانات وتحليل البيانات. شكرا.
Okay, so the question is, how do we train the next generation of society on how to get the best data, how to analyze data properly, how to structure it properly, so that in the case of Saudi Arabia, the ambitions of Vision 2030, and as Bassem was presenting, sort of the open data, so that has value. So perhaps if, Jane, if we can start with you, maybe if I can go down each of you, what do we have to put in place now to get that benefit down the line?
So there are three things that we need. I'll speak from the perspective of the US. Three things we need, and we've only got two of them so far. The first one is restructuring the curriculum in universities to take into account data and analytics, and that is happening rapidly. but it isn't yet at the scale we need. So that's item number one, and that's in place. Item number two is for cities to train, state, and federal government train staff to do analytics, and that's happening. It's spreading across. There are multiple data academy models that are working. The third thing, and where we haven't had success yet, but I have a hope for the future, is to train all managers to become interested consumers of data and to not be afraid of it. That's the thing. Can I ask you a question?
Obviously, data transformation, big data, it's been a theme for a number of years now in this region. And the question has often come up is, where should our children, what should they study? And the answer generally is STEM subjects, science, engineering, maths, data subjects. But we recently did an interview with the chief head of technology at Microsoft, I think it was, and he said, no, the bots will do all the data. The human element is the creative bit. I think what you're just saying about managers engaging with the data is should we be training our children in maths and numbers, or is it about asking the question why and the creative part?
So I have two things that I want everyone to teach their children: curiosity and empathy. If we have those two things, we're going to make really good government, right? Because curiosity is continually looking at the data and saying, what does it mean? How can we do better? Are we meeting our customers' needs, right? And empathy is that connection to what the customer, what the citizen, what the public needs. So STEM, yes, of course.
I can see you nodding, Odd, and because you were 2 minutes short in your presentation, I demand that you give a full answer here. So how should we be training the next generation, and what should we be training them in? And then how do we get the value from all this, the open data?
I absolutely agree with the curiosity aspect, empathy. It's difficult to teach these things, though, but you can give or make an environment to kind of foster these things. What's been useful, I've seen training programs. I mentioned hackathons, but training programs in terms of people who don't have IT skills or do not have too much, let's say, everyday actions with computers at all, and you would actually help them to develop this kind of computeral skills and to have this analytical skill of look behind every kind of action that you do. What is the goal that you want to achieve? Why are you doing this? And then what data are you basing that upon? So to always ask the questions, which leads up to curiosity. Ask questions. Why are you doing this? Who are you doing this for? And what's the data you're basing this on?
So I was trying to get the microphone. I wanted to bring the microphone back to you, sir. You asked the question, and I'm curious, based on what we just heard from the panelists, what is your opinion of what the young Saudi children are learning? Are they getting these skills, or do you obviously have questions in this area?
نعم، أنا كنت أعني أنه هل هناك ممارسات أفضل لتدريب هؤلاء الأطفال لنقل هذه المعرفة، لنقل هذه التقنية؟ هل هناك مثلا خطة استراتيجية على المدى البعيد لتعليمهم هذه البرامج؟
Okay, so you want to know about best practice if there's sort of if there are off-the-shelf programs to train young people.
If I may, Richard, before we go to this side about the best practices and what we should do, there is another thing that we need to focus on here. We will not focus only on our children. We have also to focus. I'm leading the innovation as a VP of innovation in my organization, and I've just got the green light from the DG who was attending here that I'll be training every employee on Python technologies and data and how to analyze data because this is how we get better results, and this is how we get innovative solution. The same thing will go into if we go back. Now I think the language of the future is programming languages are the languages of the future. If we are moving into AI, into robotics, into emerging technologies, then kids need to know how to program. And this is why in Saudi Arabia, MCIT with cooperation with MISC and other entities in the country launched a program called Saudi Arabia Programming, where we trained more than 1 million plus citizens on programming languages, basic programming languages. What I think is, and I agree with Jane when she said curiosity and empathy, because just we need to make them ask questions and not be afraid with any questions that they ask, and we should open the panel for them. They will learn math, statistics, all of the need. As long as they are asking, they will look. We are living now today, we are living in an era where access to information is not an issue anymore. I can be sitting in my home and taking the best data science school from the best schools in the world. The thing is to go and look, to put in our kids and our children and our youth the passion to learn and the passion to solve problems.
Okay, thank you. John, you haven't had a chance to comment on this yet.
And I'm not going to repeat the very good comments made so far, but I would just add a couple of points. The first is where people have got access to digital technologies at schools, then web services. Let's teach the subjects we teach, but let's use some of these web GIS, Geographic Information Services, whatever, and get people doing analysis online in whatever subjects they are studying. So that means departments of education need to sort of come on board. But I'd also add, we've got to, as a globe, think about the many, many billions of people around the world that don't have that access at the moment, because this digital divide will get worse. And I just note that the United Nations, in my small world of geospatial, has recognized this and is now trying to help developing nations, with the support of the World Bank, understand how geospatial can help them solve their problems. And education and capacity building is one component of it.
I think there's a question there. He's been raising his hand.
We have two hands up. If we can have one microphone over here. This is the first question, and the second question is the gentleman in the second row. So first, second. If you can say your name and your organization, please.
Thank you. My name's Tariq Rasul. I'm with Raz Group. My question is around the responsibility of governments and the amount of data that they'll have access to. Perhaps, I think my question is probably more towards John and the role of GDPR, and perhaps what are the lessons that can be learned from that and the benefits from something like that?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I got the whole question there, but I mean, you're absolutely right about the impact of GDPR. Interestingly, in our geospatial world, actually at the moment, the data doesn't really impact people and personal data. It's when you link it to other things that you start to have that implication. So in our world, in mapping agencies, we're dealing with data that tends to be fairly okay from a GDPR perspective. Now that could change, of course it could change, but at the moment not an issue. I think you asked something about, the word came across to me as Ebola, but I'm not sure if it was something...
Can you just repeat your question, the second part of your question? If you can put the microphone back to that gentleman for 1 second.
Sorry, I was saying, what were the benefits of GDPR with regards to data? That was my question.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think we could all speak to that. I think from a citizen perspective, GDPR offers us a sense of protection, I suppose. From a business perspective, it puts an awful lot more emphasis that we don't release personal data. But as a business, we're a government company, actually, we would not want to fall foul of GDPR, not necessarily the fines, but the reputation. Our reputation is about quality data, trusted data, and GDPR is just, if we fell foul of it, we would lose that reputation very, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. If we can have the question.
My name is Saleh Boutish, independent consultant. My question is regarding data analysis. Data structuring and analysis is done by human being, even though we are using software program. What do you think the impact of the human bias on the outcome of the data analysis? Thank you.
So I don't know who is best to talk about the human impact. Ott, you've not said anything for a long time.
I mean, if you look at Estonia, for example, it still has a lot of effect in terms of human impact. We are developing machine learning and AI technologies, but we were just discussing before that the human kind of impact will still always, fortunately, be there. We can't get rid of it. So it's here to stay.
Okay, Jane?
So to this question of bias, I have a bias toward data, because even when data has a bias in it, and it always does, right? Because data is created by humans, there's error in it, there's bias. In the US, where I come from, there's a lot of discussion around our justice system data having racial bias, right? That decades of heavily policed neighborhoods that are primarily African American has caused a disproportionate number of arrests of black men in our country. So if you look at arrest data, it's racially, you say it's racially biased because of the behaviors. So people say, oh, we can't use data analytics on this data because it's biased. I say, that's ridiculous. Don't throw the data out with the bathwater. Just recognize the bias and say we're going to do our best, because human decision-making is biased, data decision-making is biased. If we can recognize what the biases are and put human decision-making and data decision-making together, we can have a less biased, more aware set of decisions. So I think bias is one of those things that we need to be aware of. We need to be transparent about data sources, and there's a team of us who are working on an ethics handbook for developing algorithms to recognize that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we're down to the last 30 seconds. If you can keep it quite short, please.
Thank you very much for the valuable information you provided. She talked about there is around 13% of information wrong, and that is lead us to one of the reasons of that, I think, the human activity on the data. I think if we are digitalize our e-services, and what I mean by digitalize the e-services or automate our services, I mean that it reduces the human activity in any e-services, rather than we are just transfer the paperwork to the e-services that is come from A to person B to Z. That is, we can use the AI, use the validation by a system. I think all of that can reduce the error and mistake in the data. Thank you very much.
Shukran. Thank you very much. Okay, well, I think that is that's a very nice point to finish on, because the next session is on technology, and AI and machine learning is going to be part of that conversation. So thank you for providing the link to the next session. Thank you all for your questions. I thought that was a very good session on such a fundamental topic. And most important of all, thank you to Jane, John, Ott, and Bassem, our panelists, who were fantastic. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I have to fill for a couple of minutes, because we're going to go straight into the next session. And as I mentioned, the next session is on technology. So we've talked about and we have agreed, I think, that you have to put citizen first. Your government services are about serving the public, and we certainly heard from the Health Ministry about putting patients first, patient safety. We then went on to the importance of clear vision and direction for effective collaborative working across different departments. And now we've just had a session on the value of data, the quality of data, the consistency of data, and the transparency and openness of that data. So we've been through that. The next session is going to be on technology. So we had the question and the observation about the analytics, the AI asking the right questions, the machine learning asking the right questions. And then we want to look at the ecosystem and the architecture, the blockchain, or what other platforms are available. So that's what we're going to do in this session. Before we get the panelists back on stage, I want to tell you about some awards that are going to be made this evening. So we have the Deputy Minister from the Ministry for Communications and Information Technology. He will be presenting, I think, 6 awards this afternoon after our final session on culture. And these awards will be for excellence in digital project delivery across all government sectors in Saudi Arabia. So please stick around for those awards, which will be made by the Deputy Minister for Communications and Information Technology. Right, what else? Also, thank you for the questions that you submitted on Slido. We actually had so many conversation points, I didn't get to come to all of your questions, but I have received them, and we will try and use them through the next remaining 2 sessions. So, this session, as I mentioned, we're going to look now at how to approach decisions around technology and technology infrastructure, the core infrastructure. Should you use centrally provided the government as platform processes, or do you build on outsourced and diversified sources? We want to look at the different emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain. Hopefully we can touch on some other areas around applications as well as the infrastructure. And then I think we want to look at modern cross-cutting services and what applications work best across different departments and how to get the most out of them. And that's fantastic timing. Thank you very much, because I was running out of things to say. So thank you very much. Welcome. And now, as our panelists make their way to their chairs, I'm going to introduce them to you. Now, hopefully, the panelists are sitting in the correct order. So if we are sitting in the right seats, closest to me is Medat Amer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You are Medat. Welcome. You are the Chief Information Officer for Gartner.
I'm the Executive Partner for Gartner. Senior Executive Partner.
Senior Executive Partner for Gartner. And Gartner, I think, as everyone knows, one of the world's great consultancy firms in the IT and technology space. Next to Medat, we have Talal Al-Bakr. Talal is from STC Solutions, so Saudi Telecoms Company Solutions. I don't have your job title here.
That's weird.
So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your job title.
Yeah, I'm the Vice President for Digital Solutions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Vice President for STC Solutions, right here in Saudi Arabia. Next to Talal, we have Stefan Verhulst. Now, Stefan, you are the co-founder and Chief Research and Development Officer for New York University. Welcome. Next to Stefan, we have Professor Dr. Toshiya Obi, who is the Professor Emeritus and Chairman of the Institute of E-Government from Waseda University in Japan. Welcome. And then finally, last but not least, at the far end, Abdulaziz Al-Suleiman. He is the IT Director for Government at the Saudi Information Technology Company. Welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you,
If you don't mind, I would like to correct that. I'm the Executive Director for BTC for Digital Solutions, Zero Certification.
I apologize. Sorry, say that again. I didn't hear you. Executive Director for?
Executive Director for BTC.
B2C. Right. Excellent. Thank you very much for correcting me there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is your panel to talk about technology. Please give them a round of applause and make them feel welcome. Okay, Medat, you have 5 minutes.
I have to run. You are a very strict chair. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Again, I'm going to skip through some of these slides, but I'm happy to share them if you reach me through LinkedIn or Twitter. So, I'll take you through a citizen experience moment. And before we start, I just have to refresh our minds about the technologies that have been showing up lately. So just to transition you from, the mindset where this can't be done, difficult, hasn't been done, to things that we are seeing happening all the time. So, Arabsat just launched 2 satellites into orbit through Tesla, through SpaceX agency. These 2 rockets flew 120 kilometers to orbit and came back, landed on the same spot they were designed to land on. The first car has driven itself in the streets of New York for half an hour during peak hour, and it was raining at that time. And our smartwatches now will save our lives. Last week, a 61-year-old gentleman's life was saved because his watch told him that your blood pressure is high, your heart rate is 160, see a doctor. He went to the hospital and his life was saved. So, and of course, now we have facial detection, biometric detection. You can access very critical information that we were not able to access before, except through very complex means like password, etc. So the moment, I'm sorry, it's a sad moment, but it could happen, which is a car crash. So a person drives his car, he crashes, and the smartphone will detect a sudden stop. And it will, through the sensors on our clothes, will determine if everything is okay in the body and sends these vital signs to hospitals, to police stations, etc., to assess the problem that has happened. Of course, before that, because the car has sensors, it will send all the information immediately to the repair shops, and the repair shops will provide quotations. Of course, through collecting videos from the surveillance cameras around, we'll have all the information there. Your family will be notified via social media because nobody checks its email anymore or answers the phone. And finally, we will see whose fault it was. So this moment, if you just think of it, how complex this situation is, how many private, government, public, payment gateways, agencies have to come together and deliver this literally within 5 minutes, right? This is the complexity we're talking about. So this looks great, but how will we get there? Today I had a discussion with Mr. Ahmed Swayan, who had a brilliant presentation about i'timad. And one thing he mentioned, which I also want to mention, is, of course, no time for quizzes, but if you have seen this movie, which is Assassin's Creed, it talks about a group of people who used unconventional methods to fight against armies. And we advocate this as Gartner. We say, if you want to do things like i'timad, you cannot depend on your current structure that you have, be it in systems, people. You need to have what we call a bimodal thinking. So the bimodal thinking is that you think in 2 modes. You think samurai, established, secure systems and people. And at the same time, you have to think ninja. Ninjas are people who are quick, fast, mobile apps, IoT, RPA, IoT, etc. You have to really use people and systems that are different than what you currently use. And, of course, again, skimming through them quickly. I have 1 minute left. We expect that you have to have a digital platform. So by 2023, we expect that any project that is not built on a platform itself will not succeed. And the platforms, you cannot buy it off the shelf. You cannot buy one platform and put it in place and then expect it to work by itself. It has components. So the components that we are advocating today are 5 components, which quickly, I will not go through them all, but I'll just mention the customer experience platform. It's a fancy name for something very simple that we all know, which has basically a collection of systems and tools. And by the way, this is just for one platform. So imagine how many systems, vendors, expertise you need to just manage to build all this complex setup that we have. And this is only one platform. So this is one of the 5 platforms that we advocate the government to build. You don't have to have all 5 in place. However, we strongly recommend that you look at least at one set and then try to build your expertise along it. And then, of course, think about the API management and how to establish the ecosystem that we talk about also with the private sector. Because as you have seen, even in i'timad says that our objective is eventually to be there. And of course, the challenge now with all these technologies that you have is basically that, where to start, how to start, what to use, what not to use, what is hype. So we had to come up with something we call the hype cycle. So we go into detail of each technology and predict if this technology has a lifespan to succeed, to help in the government. So for example, now, as you know, the blockchain is heavily advertised. Will it help in all use cases? No, but it will be helpful in some use cases. The robotic automations, the RPA, will it help you everywhere in the government? No. Where will it help you? How far should you expect that you will reach using this RPA technologies? And of course, this is basically where you could start. You establish your ninja team with ninja products, and then you move from a concept through a roadmap. You make sure that you have a very strong enterprise architecture team, because they will eventually build all these things together. And then you review the technologies, make sure that you don't go for the hype that is being pushed by the vendors, because the vendors, they don't have always the interest of the common good. They have targets to make, they have software to sell, and license to, of course, to make money out of. So thank you for your attention, and again, happy to discuss what has mentioned here, and we can always communicate through social media. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear.
Thank you very much. Okay, excellent. That's a great set of points that we can discuss in the session afterwards. Now, Talal Al-Bakr, he is from STC Solutions, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Talal.
Thank you very much. Actually, I was working on the presentation for the last few days, and I was planning to talk about specific points. And I had an interesting discussion with engineer Ali Al-Asiri. And he mentioned that today our approach for solutions is too technology-centric. We need to be customer-centric. That took me back. I reset my mind. I started saying, okay, let's talk about it in a different approach. We at STC, we had a similar problem. We're a technology-driven company. We're a telco company. But a few years back, we noticed that we were staling in the market. What did we do? We started to focus on our customers. We started to be more customer-centric. And this is exactly, I think, the direction of what we need to do right now with regards to the government. We need to be citizen-centric. Technology will always evolve. It will always be enabled. But the core aspects of being customer-centric, simplifying the processes, simplifying the methodologies, and utilizing technology in the right way it's supposed to be utilized as an enabler, is how we need to move forward. Now, we can talk about IoT, and what we're doing in IoT. We can talk about big data analytics and how we're moving all of these different things. They will continue to evolve. Today, we're going to talk about these things because of their hype. We're doing a lot of great things around IoT, big data, cloud, and whatnot in STC. But again, these are going to be enablers for this generation. But it's not necessarily an enabler for the next generation. I loved yesterday, the opening, when they brought this little girl, and she activated the event using Alexa. Alexa is an enabler for the next generation, but it might not be the enabler for the generation after that. And this is where we need to start seeing how do we really take technology and enable it in the right way. IoT has been very instrumental. It's an evolving technology that continues to be explored and evolved, and use cases continue to be developed. 5G is an enabler for IoT. IoT is an enabler for services. E-services and cloud are enablers for simplifying processes for citizens. And this is where we need to really understand how to address the approach in a different way. Technology will enable citizens to do things in a simple fashion, in a safe fashion, in a productive fashion, and at the same time, ensuring their privacy, ensuring that their data is secure, that whatever information that they share will only be shared with those entities that are pre-approved or that the customer or the citizen themselves approve it. So today, I see the evolution of the way government needs to think about technology, not in thinking about technology holistically, but in thinking about the customer. What is the customer requirement? What is the customer need? And thinking about it in such a let's say, capitalistic approach is what will transform the way the government approaches the citizen needs, and how to make the citizen the center of all the services that are going to come out after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Talal. That's very good. I would like to move on now to Stefan Verhulst. Stefan is the co-founder and Chief Research and Development Officer from New York University.
Great, thank you very much. And I will focus on blockchain, and I will have to disappoint everyone in the room because blockchain won't change your life completely, but it might at least contribute to some of the elements. And as you all know, blockchain is one of those technologies that was in the hype cycle. It's probably one of the technologies in my lifetime that was the quickest high in the life cycle and the quickest down in the life cycle. So I hope after this short presentation that at least we will be able to have a more sophisticated look at what blockchain...
Are you saying that we've passed the peak with blockchain?
I think we passed the peak. We are actually, I think many people are actually believing that blockchain is not as such an important technology anymore, but I think we're becoming more sophisticated about what we do with blockchain, and that's what I hope we will reflect on as well. As mentioned, I'm the co-founder and chief of research and development of an organization called GovLab, which is Governance Laboratory, which I co-founded about 6 years ago. And the mission is to focus on how do we improve people's lives by changing how we govern using new technologies. And so we are based at New York University, and specifically we focus in two areas. One is around people, and so we do a lot of work around people-led innovation, but the other one is around data. And within the data field, we specifically focused on blockchain as a new technology, a new software, a new kind of cryptographic way of record data that, when validated, gets added to a chain that then can be accessed in a distributed manner. And that's the reason why quite often blockchain has another name, belongs to another category of technologies, which is called distributed ledger technologies. So ledgers that can be accessed in a distributed manner through a variety of means. Now, the project that I will talk about is Blockchange, which is Blockchain for Social Change, which is an initiative that we developed at GovLab to really try to understand how can blockchain, distributed ledger technology, be used for instigating social change, for changing the way we govern. And we did that through a variety of mapping exercises and also a variety of prototyping exercises, and all the information is available on our website. If you go to Blockchange, you will find all the examples that we studied, and there are more than 90 case studies that we have assessed to a large extent. And the first big message is that there is no one technology anymore. I mean, when we talk about blockchain, there's actually a whole diversity of technologies, and the whole diversity depends on to what extent is the technology accessible, or the record accessible, and who can change the record. And so those are the two fundamental criteria that define and decide how blockchain and technologies are currently being divided. And so you have, for instance, public permissionless, which is the nirvana for some, where all the information is accessible and everyone can make a contribution, to ultimately private permissioned kind of technologies, where only a few can access the record and it is private as well. Now, based upon the radical changes in blockchain technology, it's important to emphasize that a few attributes remain core and a few attributes are now ultimately optionable. And the core ones is that everything that is added to the chain, so every record that is added to the chain, is immutable, by which we mean it cannot be changed or it cannot be altered, which in a sense gives it the trust that is needed to really understand why that record is important, because once it's added to the chain, it cannot be changed, and as a result, it is also more trusted because it is immutable, and as a result, it has a certain integrity that you otherwise would not have, and it also has a certain resiliency because it can be accessed from a distributed point of view. Optional, however, which is what is different from the typical discussions of blockchain is that it's not disintermediation anymore, so and it's quite often now locked in with regard to who has access to these, so quite often mediated, and also not always transparent and not always accessible, as already mentioned. Now, the question is, of course, how and why should we care? I mean, what are the kind of applications that matter from a social change point of view? And frankly, there are three types of applications that, from a governance point of view, blockchain could make a difference if applied in an appropriate manner. The first one is track and trace. So if you want to track and trace assets, then blockchain quite often is a good technology. And this is an example, for instance, here, where De Beers is now using blockchain technology to track and trace diamonds so that consumers of diamonds know whether the diamond is a blood diamond and was ultimately processed or disseminated in inappropriate manners, or whether it was a trustworthy kind of diamond. The second kind of application relates to smarter contracting, which basically relates to if a record is contributed in a manner that identifies and provides proof of delivery, for instance, then automatically a contract and quite often a payment gets made. And this is an example here of using blockchain to save the forest in Indonesia. Farmers typically burn down forests in order to get new land. If now we can prove in an immutable manner through satellite imagery that the farmer is not burning down the forest, then they automatically get paid. And so it's a smarter contracting system that lowers the transaction cost of actually achieving certain kind of contracts. And then the other one is identity, and here is just a few technologies with regard to identity lifecycle that indicates that blockchain can be used for identity attestation as well. Now, the question is, of course, very quickly, is what are the challenges? And I'm just going to highlight a few to at least make blockchain a more sophisticated discussion. The first one big challenge of blockchain is still the user interface. It's still a very immature technology, and it's very hard still to actually access blockchain. When to blockchain? And here we have a set of conditions that if you are interested in blockchain that you can use to determine whether actually blockchain is the appropriate technology. And the first question that we pose is that, is the problem related to information asymmetries? If you have an information asymmetry challenge, then blockchain might be a good technology. The second condition is, do you have data that is digital? Because if you don't have data that is digital, don't even start thinking about blockchain, because that, of course, you first need to have a record. And then, is there an ecosystem that allows for actually the blockchain to be accessed and used? Now, based upon all that, we developed...
much more to do because we need to...
That's it. That's the last slide. Based upon all that, we developed a set of design principles that you can download on our website, which we call Genesis, which stands for, first of all, if you want to develop blockchain, invest in the governance of the blockchain. I mean, too often with too much focus is on the technology and not enough on the governance, and it's actually the governance that's going to matter moving forward. And lastly, also assure that the first block is accurate, because the saying garbage in, garbage out especially applies to blockchain, given the fact that once you've added the record, it's immutable, and so you want to assure that the first block is accurate, because that determines the rest of the chain. So with that, I hope we've become somewhat more sophisticated in 5 minutes about blockchain, but happy to address any question you might have.
That's excellent, Stefan. Thank you very much. We will come back to that. I think there's quite a lot in that we can come back to you on. Final, sorry, one more after this, I apologize. Dr. Toshiya Obi is the Professor Emeritus and Chairman of the Institute of E-Government at Waseda University in Japan.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be in Saudi Arabia the first time. And I'm not sure the reason why I was selected as the speaker. Maybe you can find out my careers. And I'm director of the world rankings of the e-government for 14 years, and the director of the APEC e-government research center, and chair of the Japanese National e-government promotion council, and so on and so on. So I'd like to make about some issues on the technologies. Yeah. As I said, WASEDA has the 14 years to work on the international e-government rankings. And I find out several of the very interesting issues. And just I introduce the name of the technologies which is more popular than any others, like cloud computing and IoT, one-stop service and open data, AI innovations, and blockchain, cybersecurity, citizen-centric, and the smart digital city. These are most popular topics in the e-government in the world. Then what is the future challenge for global and next generation digital government? One is the super aging societies, just like Japanese societies, everybody living over 80 and 90s now. And the new digital divide, which might be a very sophisticated issue in the future. Not old digital divide for citizens' computer literacy. And trend on the destructive technologies, which we didn't have 1 decade before, and this technology cannot be catching up by people and the government. So we have the new technology gap. And open innovation to business and citizen is now under operations, and solution for critical issues like BCP disaster and cybersecurity, smart mobilities like auto driving cars is our issue for technology transfer. And digital government, new issue is how we can cope with the rapid urbanizations and aging societies and digital societies and globalizations and the most popular innovative technologies. These are new issue for digital government, and agenda for setting up next generation digital government is one the innovative government, and also some integrated, in fact, what calls the emerging technologies like AI, IoT, big data, blockchain, cloud, and 5G and HKTVs, and also applications for open data and BCP for disasters, and e-health and e-mobilities are issue for next generation digital government. And the last one is a suggestion on the putting citizen first. One is the harmonization between central and state and local government to work with the private sectors, also citizen-centric in terms of the one-stop digital services. Second, solution on new urban megacity issues with digital citizens. Third one, new agenda on sustainable social infrastructure for citizen quality of life for SDG. And fourth, capital capacity building for AI and big data at the comprehensive university courseware with PPP, public-private partnership. And since I'm the professor of the universities, I really think about the capacity building in human resource development on the emerging technologies like AI and big data. It's a huge shortage of the manpower building. So we need the new CIO roles like
not only innovation, but also information and with technologies and data analysis. So these must be integration among the new technologies and the disruptive technology as the digital transformations. Thank you very much.
Professor Obi, thank you very much. Wonderful presentation and some great headings there, particularly at the end for talking points afterwards. Abdul Aziz Al-Suleiman is the IT director for, actually you corrected me on this before,
yeah, it's executive director for BTC Networks.
Excellent, thank you very much. You have 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
السلام عليكم. حاب أرحب فيكم وأشكركم لدعوتي لحضور البانل وبي panel speaker. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you. I feel privileged to be one of the speakers in this panel of technology in this global forum. I'm going to talk about digital trust services and how it can be embedded and empower citizen services. I'm going to go with the remote signing and digital signing in the services and how it can help and benefit citizen services. But I'm going to go back to yesterday when the great speech from Andreas, he touched many, many different things that really covered the three first slides that we're going to talk about today. He started with the digital solutions and how trust in Sweden helped to rate tax services high because of trust. They enabled trust in the services and made it work. Those elements really important and crucial to offer services. Digital services is the BKI infrastructure that enable the means to bind digital services and identity in the digital services. So this is where we can offer trust to the services. I'm sorry, maybe I misaligned my presentation. We see government right now everywhere, like Estonia and India and many Belgium, they have different implementation of trust services. The success is when they been transparent and applied trust and transparency in those services, how to comply and offer compliance and standards, consolidating those services together and made the right drivers. Government had to have the legal drivers like legal acceptance endorsement. They have a duty to have endorsement and awareness for citizens and understand how they will manipulate and offer their data. It's very important and crucial so they see the fairness of applying the standards and consolidating the different authority standards to offer the service. For example, if we talk about passport agencies, there are many applications that you have to file and pass to get the service. If we go with tax filing, like what been discussed yesterday, many services have been discussed, how they now they love and understand what's been implemented and what's been applied to get the tax filing. To have this service, every government are eager to have the right infrastructure of services. Maybe Andreas yesterday also discussed the digital identity, digital services. He mentioned the importance to prevent or actually limit the access of privatization in digital IDs. Digital IDs is very important as government are concerned with digital identities as they assernate the true identities and legitimacy to population. The ultimate outcome to have a digital ID equally valid as physical IDs that we are using right now. With that, government have the access to the different digital identities where we can implement KYC, which is electronic know your client or know your citizen that can be embedded with the services. I'm going to focus on the second layer, which is signing platform. Signing platform where we can apply it in the different applications that you're going to offer from different service provider. This is a sample architecture where agnostic for different services. A citizen can offer their digital documents to the service provider, will be attached with KYC information, going to the trusted service provider. Then they have the BKI, they will issue the certificates, bind it with the document going back to the service provider. One of the success stories that I'm going to focus in is the Unique ID Authority in India. What they have developed, in only 10 years, since 2009, they implemented 12-digit random number based on demographic information and biometrics. The result, after having this infrastructure, a whopping 1.2 billion registered citizens. Add to that, digitally, they had 29 billion authentications because they empowered their citizens the right way. They augmented the services to their customer and the citizen, and they had this enablement that we are hoping to have be enabled in a different government. KYC, the right attributes with the right authority, with the right implementation and compliance, had been 7 billion. My final slide. Annually in India, 10 million passport applications being signed. I'm not concerned originally about this. I'm concerned about that the result is 70% minimizing the branch visit. Not just the numbers, is how we make it easier for customers. 40 million tax filing, like what's been discussed yesterday. People has to feel that being dealt fairly, and their data was correctly managed and dispensed with the right people. 60% greater efficiency in tax filing. 120 million bank account. People in India, from their mobile right now, they can issue and open accounts. What was the result of this? Prevention of the tedious documents that had been filing and having proofs of different visits from rural areas to get and reach open accounts. The last thing is 240 million annually transportation documentation have been there. So 80% reduction of the processes to offer this service. This is based only on the infrastructure that we mentioned at the beginning. Having EID, digital ID that is accepted and legally binding, have digital signing on those documents, manipulating the data fairly with people and protecting their privacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdulaziz. Okay, so a lot of content, quite a diverse range of content. I have some questions here. Now, if you have a question from the floor about technologies and any of the points that have been made, please raise your hand, or you can send in the question onto the Slido app as well, as we mentioned earlier. And I'll just see if we have any questions on Slido at the moment. None at the moment. Okay, I'm going to come back, Medhat, to you. You started off, and I don't know if I heard, you said there are 5 platforms that you advocate for governments. Yes. And I think you showed a Venn diagram that had them, but you didn't talk about them. What are the 5 platforms, and why are you advocating 5 platforms?
We're advocating them because we believe that today any government entity needs to look at the first platform, which is the IT platform, the ecosystem platform, the customer experience platform, the data platform, and...
Sorry, the IT platform, what was the second one?
The customer experience platform.
So that's the front face.
Yes, yeah. And then the IoT platform.
That's where the data is.
Exactly, and then you have the ecosystem platform.
And what is that the blockchain bit? That's
the ecosystem is basically the one that talks to the APIs, you know, how to talk to private sector, to public, to government citizen. And the last one was, the most important, was the citizen platform. This is the citizen experience platform, which has all the technology related to the customer experience.
So just on Abdulaziz's presentation there, where he's talking about trust,
yes,
and ID, so that would be under the customer experience element at the end.
Yeah.
So Abdulaziz, your presentation was not so much about technology, but about the confidence in the system, the way the system is perceived to get people to provide that raw data.
Exactly. It's when you rely on trust services that's being governed and accepted in the governments and offered to the citizen, this is where you can have trust. So digital solution based on the technology of public key infrastructure. This is where we are employing and embedding to have the digital signing for all documents for the services offered to the citizen clients.
And you highlighted the case study in India where they've had 1.2 billion citizens have given their ID. I mean, that's incredible.
Exactly.
What were the key success factors in that, I don't know what you call it, registration process?
Well, they have, this is, to be fair, this is the 1.2 billion is not all digital. It's physical and digital. But they give them ability to get this random number ADRA, the digital, to have it in their digital ID. So it's proven and accepted everywhere in the government, both in the business section or sector or the private sector or the public sector.
It's interesting you made the point that it wasn't all digital, some was paper, or is there a, I mean, ultimately data is data, so someone else can translate it from analog to digital, but is there a perception problem? Is it more difficult to get data digitally than it is through traditional processes?
Definitely. Now, with the eKYC, your attribute as a citizen now registered and verified in a database that's governed by the government. So you can have your data now digitally everywhere from rural areas and far away because, you know, let's be fair that most offices in the government are tier 1 and tier 2 cities. So it will be difficult for people to have this data being used in their services. For example, when we talked about 10 million annually for the passports, that means that people are traveling from far away and losing time to offer those services. So just think about this one. Your data now is online, and even in poor countries, it would be easy that to have a phone. Maybe Andreas mentioned that it's dumb phones. Yes, dumb phones, but you can use it to be more smarter and more effective.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Stefan, I want to come to you because I've only just caught up with the concept of blockchain, and you're telling me it's redundant technology now. Well, I didn't understand your presentation because you started off by telling me that blockchain was past, but it sounded like the rest of your presentation was about the role of blockchain, so I'm not sure what you were saying. Are you, you know, when you were talking about the applications of distributed ledger technology, okay, maybe blockchain is just one of those, but track and trace, smarter contracting, ID. I'm not sure what you were saying. Are you saying forget blockchain, there's new technology, or
No, what I'm saying is that the areas where blockchain has potential are in those three areas.
Right.
So those are the three most profound areas where blockchain can make a difference. So it's about track and trace, where you actually have a record or an asset that you can trace wherever it goes in a distributed manner, and everyone has access to the same record, which is very important to have. And it is a typical example where you deal with information asymmetries, where you typically have power asymmetries on who has actually access to the record. If you have a distributed way of accessing that record, then suddenly it becomes more disintermediated, and everyone has the same access to the same record, and as a result, lowers the transaction cost, but also lowers the power asymmetry. So that's a very powerful application. The other one is around smarter contracting, where you need to have a record to then activate the contract, for instance. And the big challenge with contracts is quite often is that it takes a while to be able to establish whether, for instance, a service was delivered. If you have a record, the service was delivered in real time, and it is trusted, then you can automatically, for instance, provide payment, as opposed to wait for 8 months to actually validate whether the service was delivered according to the conditions. And so it lowers, again, the transaction cost. It's, again, an information asymmetry kind of situation. And then the last one is identity, where most of the hype quite often has been around identity, but where there are actually quite a lot of challenges to apply blockchain, mainly because, and that's also with what was discussed there, is that the real challenge with identity is to establish a record in the first place. And And so for identity to be secure and then ultimately to authenticate and have some kind of authorizations or rights attached to it, you first have to establish a record. And that's still, there you still need different technologies, and blockchain cannot solve that problem.
What I'm confused about, though, is, so in the last panel discussion, we talked about data.
Yeah.
One of the panelists talked about the national virtual twin, and, creating a national geospatial database, that a virtual twin. I would have thought, that's a good thing to aim for, and that blockchain is the architecture that government should be investing in to provide a secure, immutable virtual twin environment that people can add and subtract to or whatever. But what I heard you say at the beginning, and I might have misunderstood, was that forget blockchain's fine, but it's past the peak. So where should the bit that worries me is how, if I'm a government thinking I'm going to invest in blockchain, I've just heard you say, forget it.
I did a bad job with my opening comments, but I was trying to say is that if I would have given the talk last year, everyone would have thought that blockchain was the solution to everything, right? And so I think what I've tried to say is that we have to become more sophisticated to really understand what is the value of blockchain and what are the conditions that allows us to blockchain. Now, it turns out that you do need to have...
So blockchain has some very important roles.
It has, and it becomes more mature because it's still a very immature... While the hype cycle might be down, the maturity cycle is still, anyway, to be developed. But I think there are a few use cases where blockchain is superior. In other places, other data disclosure technologies might be better, cheaper, and more mature. And so that's what we really have to try to understand. When is it appropriate?
Okay. Professor Obe, if I can come to you. You had a list of 5 challenges at the end of which I thought was very interesting. And I wanted to ask you on each of the challenges, and maybe other panelists might want to add. The first one was this harmonizing central government and local authority. You've identified that as a challenge for government. What is that about standards, or is it about transparency? What is the challenge?
Yeah. As a chairman of the Japan National E-Government Promotion Councils, yes, we can have really a big gap between central and the local or municipalities. One is the technology itself. Second is capitals, financing. Third one is the capacity building, the human capabilities. So that's really challenge. If the central government can really assist many local government to have the 3 factors to be improved.
So basically the local or the smaller authorities don't have the financial or human or technological capacity. They need to be supported by the national central government.
That's right.
And that's the way to create an integrated...
Yeah. Like Tokyo and Osaka in Japan, it's a huge capital and second city as the mega cities. And like a budget of Tokyo metropolitan is bigger than all the African countries' GNP except South Africa. So mega city is okay, but we have the 1,200 small city and municipalities. How they can be so-called standardized without the digital divides among the cities and prefectures.
I think that's important in my understanding of what's going on in Saudi Arabia, where you have the big cities, the Riyadh, Jeddah, Mecca, Medina, but there's a part of Vision 2030 is to develop the second-tier cities. And so maybe there's an important lesson there from your challenges. I'm going to just go to, we had a question from the floor, and I think it's important that people in the audience get to ask their questions. So if you could say your name and your organization, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Mansour Sweden, Deputy CIO, King Faisal Specialist Hospital. So my question is for Mr. Stephen, Mr. Midhat regarding blockchain. how do you evaluate the use of blockchain in healthcare, currently in healthcare, whether it's been implemented in US or any different country in the world? We hear a lot about blockchain. It's been used in financial, but not any other sectors, even though there's lots and lots of talk about blockchain. So I'd like to know, how do you evaluate that current? And how do you see or vision the use of blockchain in the future for healthcare in relation to, as we say, citizen-centric to patient-centric in healthcare? And the last question for Mr. Talal also is, within the healthcare sector in STC, are there plans to use the blockchain within healthcare? Is this something STC is visioning or planning to implement?
Okay, I'll start with Meda,
Thank you.
and then Stefan, and then Talal, you can take the final question.
It's a very good question, and we have counted, and when I go back to the hype cycle of blockchain, it is past the hype cycle. So now we are seeing some very useful use cases that a lot of industries are implementing. In fact, Mr. Ali Asiri had a great presentation during one of the sessions that explaining the use cases, success and failures. In the healthcare sector, to be honest with you, it is still very early. We have not seen, so we have calculated around 105 use cases in various sectors, and healthcare does not have any good use cases so far. So I would suggest, start with the basics first in the healthcare. A lot of robotic that can be helped, the patient's data management will also be very important, but blockchain for healthcare, I think it's a bit early to start with.
Stefan.
Yeah, so one use case, and again, there are plenty of white papers about using blockchain, but the question is, do those white papers translate into actual practice, right? And I think that's where the challenge quite often resides. But one of the use cases that has been looked at a lot is around self-sovereign identity and health information. Meaning, self-sovereign identity is the concept where an individual can access his and her data and manage his and her data as they please, and so as opposed to be dependent, for instance, on others creating the data, but also others then providing access to the data. And there has been a lot of effort to develop self-sovereign identity within the healthcare sector, and actually it started already many years ago when, in my previous position, when I was head of research of a foundation, we were the first ones to come up with a personal health record where an individual had access to his or her data and could then share his and her data with whoever they wanted to share the data with. And self-sovereign identity is a version of that. Now, the real challenge, and so it's different than electronic medical records, because electronic medical records, you quite often don't control the data. And self-sovereign identity, you as an individual control the data and can decide who to share it with. The challenge, however, which is related to one of my challenges that I didn't manage to touch upon, is that in order for that to work, you need an ecosystem of providers that are willing to accept the record, right? If you have a record and you manage the record and it says, you go to the doctor and says, this is my blood type, and through blockchain you could have had some kind of a authentication that that is your blood type, but if you still have a provider that says, no, I only accept a record that we created, because then we can trust that record, then the whole system falls apart, right? And so you need an ecosystem that accepts the record and trusts that the validation of the record was done in a manner that confirms with their expectations of validations. And so that's, by the way, the challenge in most of those ID systems approaches, including
maybe
the
where STC comes into it then. So the final part of the question was, what are STC's plans around healthcare blockchain?
Actually, it goes back to what Stefan mentioned previously. Initially, we looked at blockchain and finding a solution with blockchain. So we were, with the paradigm of technology was driving the need. And we were initially under the impression blockchain will solve all problems. And to be honest, once we started to go deeper into the actual problem assessment, we found that a lot of the data, a lot of the information, specifically on medical records, needs to be structured in traditional methodologies that are outside of blockchain. But we have sort of a blockchain authentication aspect to ensure that even though the data is in traditional aspects, we can put sort of a blockchain authenticity layer on top of it to ensure that it's immutable.
Why would data be outside of not suitable for blockchain?
Initially, there was a project, I think it's called Universal File System. And it had the concept that if we put the data onto the blockchain, and all data can live on the blockchain. And while conceptually that's a good idea, it doesn't work with regards to regulations, to regards to policies, to regards to access, and it's to be honest, it's a security potential risk. So even though initially we wanted to solve everything with blockchain, we had to take a few steps back and say, okay, this needs to be outside of blockchain, but we still need some aspects of blockchain so that when we intercommunicate between different units, we can do that. And that's where we're trying to work right now with regards to medical health.
Medat was shaking his head there.
No, just summarize كلام جميل, but eventually all white paper, all research, look for the use cases. اسأل what are the use cases, who has done it successfully, and has proven that he has managed to save money, time, or efforts. Kalam, the talk is a lot. Vendors will push it. So my advice to you, use cases is your starting point.
Okay, now we have one more question. I know that you've asked several questions, but if you could give us a reminder of your name and organization.
My name is Saleh Boutish. I know my question is a virtual one, but I'm seeking your reaction. Technology is need-driven. Do you expect in the long-run future we can utilize IoT to transport or to send material such as spare parts or cars from place to place?
So I don't know if this is a 3D printing question, but maybe who wants to answer this? So IoT, what's the full potential of IoT?
Yeah, actually, we have already existing use cases. We have cases where IoT devices like drones are being used for delivery aspects. 3D printing, as you mentioned, is a potential aspect. But again, the potential for coming out with more unique products is still yet to be tapped. What we know today with regards to IoT is we're building the infrastructure for communication, for connectivity, for data exchange. Now, how we want to build these technologies and what we want them to do is open to our imagination. We have use cases right now that are extremely basic, and we continue to evolve on that. And I think as we progress, we will come up with more innovative use cases, things that have really not touched upon our senses and what we believe can be possible today. So it's a work in progress, and that's, I think, the amazing thing about that.
Okay, thank you. Stefan?
So I think one way to address the question is to think about what is IoT in principle. And in principle, it's again data, meaning it's just a new way of through sensors generating new data sets, quite often very rich and very in real time. And so the question then is, of course, what are the use cases for having access to real-time data? And there are multiple use cases. One that we have worked on is around what we call circular city data, i.e. if you start using IoT in a city, how do you start using that data to governing the city in real time? And so we have many applications in New York City, for instance, where we use IoT devices that are placed throughout the city to then inform, for instance, what is the impact of construction on traffic, and then as a result, what is the impact on economic development in that region? And so how do you then change the way you develop construction to then deal with the traffic problem that has an impact on economic development, for instance? And so this is just one kind of governance question that you can start addressing as well, but there are multiple other kind of questions that you can start answering by having access to IoT data that is ultimately the real asset that IoT delivers.
Okay, thank you. Professor Obi?
Yeah, yes, I think the IoT is very hot issue, but within 1 decade from now, we may face the IoE Internet of Everything by AI-oriented technologies. So IoT, like things, is only one of few categories which technology can handle in the future. So IoE, Internet of Everything, is appropriate within maybe 1 decade.
Sorry, I don't understand the difference. So IoT is objects, and IoE is what?
Software and everything.
Okay. So that. Okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
You've reached the limit of my imagination, so that's a good time to finish this session.
Yes.
It's been a fantastic session again. I've really enjoyed this one, even though I've not necessarily. My dumb questions probably give away my ignorance in this field. Thank you again for your wonderful questions from the floor, but if we can just please put our hands together to thank our excellent panelists. So Medhat, Talal, Stefan, Professor Obi and Abdulaziz. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to break now for 30 minutes for a tea break and refreshments, and then we'll be back here for the final session on cultural change at 4:30. Thank you very much. Okay, welcome back to those of you who have made it. If you could just take your seats, we'll try and encourage the rest of the people from the tea area to make their way in. We've made it this far. We don't want to fall off our schedule now. So take your seats and let's get going. We'll just pull the panelists together. Thank you. We'll start in about 1 minute. Okay, welcome back. Congratulations to all of you who've made it to this stage of the day. It's been a very intense day of information and discussion. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much for all of your contributions. We're into the final panel discussion. There are some things happening after this panel discussion. We're going to have, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some awards. The Deputy Minister of Communications and Information Technology is going to be delivering some awards right here to recognise some outstanding performances in digital project delivery. across government in Saudi Arabia. And then we're going to have a short panel, not a panel, an on-stage interview just to summarize the key themes that we've picked up on today. So we've still got quite a lot of work to do, but right now we're moving on to our panel session on culture. And I think this is really, for me, at the heart of the whole story. So we're talking about delivering better government services, putting people first, capturing data, being more transparent, working collaboratively, breaking down silos, traditional vertical organizational silos, working in new project teams, new decision-making processes, etc., and all of that comes down to doing things differently. That means changing habits, changing the way we behave, changing culture, and it starts with the individual and then emanates out to the organization. So it's very, very fundamental to everything, and we have an amazing panel, 6 panelists, so I'm going to stop talking in a moment and get started. Immediately on my left here, I hope everyone is in the correct seat. So we have Renaud Seligman, immediately on my left. He is the practice manager in the governance global practice at the World Bank. Welcome, Renaud. Next to him, we have Chris Ferguson, who's Director of Government Digital Service in the UK. Next to him, we have Sebastian Chua, who is the Head of Procurement in Health Promotion at the Health Promotion Board in Singapore. And I'm really excited to hear Sebastian, because I think procurement, for me personally, I find it a very interesting subject, and it's come up with a couple of the presentations already from the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Health, I think it was. Then we have Emmanuel Kigomo, the Deputy Director General from the Department of Public Service and Administration in South Africa. Welcome, Emmanuel. Then we have, now I hope I say your name correctly, Rob van Weitzwinkel. That was luck. Thank you. Who is the City Manager and Chief Executive Officer for the City of Arnhem in the Netherlands. And at the far end of the group, we have Mohammed Al-Kabti, who is the Head of Culture Change at Saudi Telecommunications company, STC Group. So, ladies and gentlemen, your panel, please a quick round of applause, make them feel welcome. And I'm now going to invite Renaud to take the stage for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And salam alaikum again. Very happy to be here and talk about culture. I thought that for the culture session I should take my tie off. It's more tech friendly. But since we're talking about culture, I thought I would start with a reference to something that some of you might have heard of, which is Game of Thrones. So the season is starting, and it starts with a vision. Right, it starts with a vision, and GovTech or the introduction of technology in the public sector starts with a vision as well. And it's a vision that is based around the experience of people, of citizens and users. And that experience is very familiar to a lot of you in your day-to-day life, because you're all citizens as well, which is that obstacle course of running from one building to another, filling in multiple forms, and basically having a very hard time getting what government is supposed to give you. Now, that is, in many countries around the world, what we observe, is that lived experience of the obstacle course of getting a service. What we want to move to is this one, what we've been talking about all day, which is that idea of human-centered, integrated, transparent government. A very different vision indeed, one that is enabled by digital ID, digital connectivity, mobile payments, but that focuses on every one of those orange dots, from healthcare to taxes to social services to civil registries. This is the prize, is getting that human-centered, transparent service delivery. But the problem is that the reality is very different from the vision. The reality is more like the Iron Throne. It's a reality of a lot of feudal entities that think that they are a world unto their own, that they each have their own data, their own systems, their own approaches, and that they know best how to manage their own IT. They know best how to manage the data, and they know best what their users want. So how do you move from the vision to the reality? Well, the first thing you need to do is to really take these two elements, problem-driven and user-centric, seriously. Problem-driven means you start not with the technology. You start with what is the problem that you want to fix for your people. You need to have a very good definition of that. And then you can be user-centric. And you can really, so that is the fundamental cultural shift that we need to bring to the public sector, from moving from a legal and economic and regulatory view of government to one that is focused on the end product and the experience of users. First, big transition. Second one, the data culture. We've talked quite a bit about it. And on the left is the reality of what a lot of government archives look like, you know, where documents are just kept for legal reasons. One day they might be needed, they get dusty, they don't really thought of as an asset. On the right is the new world, a world where data is an asset, the new oil as we discussed earlier, but also the center, the underpinning of everything that allows government to deliver services, to define policy, and also to really make a difference to the lives of citizens. That's the second big shift, is a big shift in the data culture. Recognize your data, know where it is, value it, manage it better, and put it out there. Open data to get the private sector to use it and develop value-added services, create jobs in the process. Rather than gaining a few dollars or a few reals by getting people to pay for data, give it out for free and make hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in the economic output that you're creating. And the third and final element of the equation is creativity and innovation. You know that technology is moving very fast. The public sector has normally a different pace. You can stress the public sector. You can put objectives that are very taxing and that pull people forward. But unless you unleash creativity and innovation, unless you manage to bring civil servants back to their childhood, to that sense of excitement and joy at creating something new, unless you do that by using technology as a lever to create that and have a tripod composed of the digital transformation effort, innovation labs, and maybe some behavioral insights as well to nudge people into changing. If you have these three elements together, then you stand a very good chance of being able to get to the kind of digital transformation that we need. So, in short, it's about changing the culture of working across government, number one. Number two, it's about changing the culture of data. And number three, changing the culture of creativity. And with that, I thank you very much.
Well, I have to say that was impressive. 5 seconds to spare. Well done. Okay, so I'd like to hand over now to Charles Ferguson, Director of Government Digital Service from the UK. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
Chris.
Hello, it's Chris Ferguson. Salam alaikum.
I can't read, sorry.
I'm from the United Kingdom. I'm the Director of the Government Digital Service, and it's an honour to be here. In the UK, we started our digital journey in 2011, very much with a user-first mentality. We captured this in one of the very first things we published, which is our design principles. And I'd remind everybody, design is not what it looks like, design is how it works. And that wasn't me saying that, that was Steve Jobs who coined that phrase. And one of the fundamental and primary principles we came up with was that you start with user needs. And that's the definition. Now, in terms of culture and the culture we're looking to create, one thing that doesn't get mentioned very often is, of course, you don't generally create culture in a vacuum. There is an existing government culture, and what you're trying to do is create a new culture or to refresh the culture that's there. This is an incredibly challenging thing to do. And what you need to do it is you need to work differently and encourage others to work differently. But you need to be very clear on what the value is to working differently. And one of the things we pressed very hard in the UK was the difference and how enabling it was to be open. Not just open in terms of to the world, but open with each other. In terms of culture between departments and agencies, culture between teams, culture between services, between areas of government that held on to data. And you can see here just a few examples where the UK has pressed very hard to be open source in terms of showing the code that we've used to develop a lot of our products. Open data, creating data standards that allow us to publish data. Standards for technology, standards for services, digital service provision, communities. So creating horizontal communities across government so that we weren't staying in our vertical departmental mentality and saying, well, I'm a service designer and I work in the Treasury or I work in the Department for Taxation. I'm going to work with the license people in the Vehicle Licensing Agency. And I'm going to get to know them and understand their service, because we all have the same customer, whether they're paying tax, getting a passport, or a vehicle license. It's the same person we are serving, and they would like to see a consistent service. Open markets. That was really, really important. I'm really pleased to hear our moderator today talk about the importance of procurement reform. The UK has something called the Digital Marketplace, if you want to look it up. And it's the way that we took a very tiny supply base in 2010 that was receiving almost every single pound that we were spending on technology. And we've radically transformed that so that 60% of the money spent through our digital marketplace towards digital outcomes and services now goes to small and medium enterprises in the UK. Those suppliers were all clustered around London, and now there were 4,000, 6,000 suppliers, in fact, all over the UK, in every corner of the United Kingdom, which is proof that government has, when it speaks with one voice to the market, you have sufficient buying power to move the market, to reshape the market to what you need it to be. But you're basing the ask and what you need the market to be on your understanding of what the user needs are. Government needs, we've probably understood them all for decades, if not centuries, but user needs are harder to articulate and require new work to find. And finally, an open culture. So in the UK, we work very hard to create blogs, not just for ourselves in the government digital service, but in departments, for politicians, so that everyone was speaking and learning openly and saying, this is hard, we've made a mistake, we're going to try again, we're going to fix this, oh, look, it's gotten better. And doing that really helped us. I mentioned that sometimes there's an existing culture, and so these are just a couple of the challenges we faced in the UK, bringing policy closer to operational services, recognizing that just because we're doing digital doesn't mean we can forget about the telephone, the government offices, the postal channels, because what you want to do is be gathering data from all of those channels in order to inform your service delivery. And projects running across organizational boundaries. Being used to that, you have to go where the data takes you, where the user research takes you, and that takes courage to do. For people who are trying to redesign the culture and redesign services, it takes courage to do that. So I would say in closing, the culture we've sought to create in the UK is one where we're trying to create whole services that understand all the different channels and all the different types of users, and see ourselves as a whole government. And not as this is our area of government that we have to make better, but actually that we can improve the whole of government at the same time, as long as we're collaborating and working openly with each other and have a culture of openness. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. If you could put that just on the podium, thank you. I want to come back to you in the questions about your government changing market, because in this country they are trying to drive local capacity in the supply chain through in-country value programs, and it sounds like there might be some lessons there. Okay, we're on to procurement again. So Sebastian Chua is the head of procurement for the Health Promotion Board in Singapore. Over to you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I come from Singapore. So on this topic, in shaping the culture and building capability for collaboration across government agencies, it has to start from all of us. To begin with, we need to correct the 3 myths about innovation in the public sector. Number 1, we cannot rock the boat. 2, we cannot fail. 3, we are too junior to make a difference. The truth are really, it is up to all of us. We have the responsibility to create a space to allow innovation to happen. We can rock the boat if it is the right thing to do. It is not about failure, but rather about adapting and learning. Everyone can make a difference. Whether in the public or private sector, we face tightening fiscal and manpower constraints, yet expected to deliver our jobs faster, cheaper, better, and proper. To achieve this, we need to find new ways of doing things and not only rely on the tested solution. But are we too busy to innovate, or is it just a mindset issue?
That's a good
When faced with a challenge, we may not realize that the solution is already present, but it is somehow not seen. We, in fact, have the key to unlock this value, not the tools, not the technologies, just a change in our attitudes. Is innovation really easier said than done? It is in our nature, for most of us, to prefer the status quo over uncertainty and worry about trying new things will cause us to make mistakes. We need to think beyond this uncertainty and worries and be open to new ideas and adapt to new realities. Innovation does not mean we have to achieve big things. It can start with this very simple principle. Think big, start small, act fast. Most importantly, we must be clear of the objective to be achieved, plan ahead, and understand the trade-off. To innovate, we also have to accept that there will be some risk of failure or mistake, but we must still be daring to try and accept that failure is sometimes inevitable when we try. In building a service culture, we must show to the people that we care and we are willing to get involved. And how do we spell care? C-A-R-E. C, to me, is customer experience. The change only happens when we make an impact on people's needs. A, for accountability. To be accountable for results, it is critical for us to understand what are the motivations and drivers of the people around us. R, for relationship. It needs to be built outside of our work. We must start to show that we are now doing things differently rather than doing different things. E, for empathy. This is so important in all we do, but hardly in mention. We don't really need to be able to help in reality, but our empathy matters a lot. What does the theory of success say? To me, the quality of conversation determines the quality of decision. Every successful relationship starts with a quality conversation. On the negative side, a disappointing conversation creates a wrong perception of us. And very often, our response drives people's perception of us.
1 minute.
Okay. What are the 3 A of innovation? Ambition. We must have a strong sense of ambition, believing in the better future and wanting to create that future together. 2, action. We must move to act and not be paralyzed by the fear of failure. It is only through doing that we learn what works and what does not. 3, alignment. We need to draw connections between different areas of work and between different government agencies to find solutions to our problems today. Last slide. Some key takeaway. Number 1, remember these 3 buttons in our computer keyboard. Control, alternate, delete. Control, review areas that require more or less control. Alternate, always on the lookout for better alternate solution. Delete, be bold to delete unproductive, costly, and unnecessary processes that are evident in our culture today. 2, digitalization alone cannot transform any business. We need both human skills and digitalization to transform our jobs. Digitalization is not the target. It is just an enabling tool to achieve agility. 3, we cannot solve our problem with the same thinking that we have created, that we used when we created them. Number 4, think big, start small, act fast. And last, together and only together can we deliver a truly superior customer journey. And let me conclude quickly with a quote from Yegma of Alibaba. The thing that worries me is not about technology, but how do we educate our children in a way that 20 years later, they can do things that machine cannot do. I don't think technology is going to conquer people, because as humans, we have so moral values and beliefs which machines do not. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sebastian. We're going to move from Singapore to South Africa now. Emmanuel Kugumo is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Public Services and Administration in South Africa. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. I'm going to try and be quick. Just in a summary, there are three things I want to bring to your attention. First, it's when we talk public service and putting people first, we're talking mandates, there's legislation involved, and in terms of South Africa, there is legislation that governs how public servants do their work. Secondly, it's how we deliver those mandates. Within the departments, there will be strategic plans, there will be operational plans. It's how we deliver. That also then goes together with how public servants perform. So performance is part of it. Now, culture comes when we talk of performance, because that's where we try to drive service delivery. How do we do that? We've got government planning, which is centralized. Government in South Africa is centralized. We have a national government of unity, so to speak, but we do have a form of decentralization of federalism, where with the provinces having some autonomy, municipalities having autonomy. So each section has got a driving, rather legislation that drives them. Nationally, we control everything. So every sphere of government must go with national government. We have a policy that guides in terms of culture control. We call it the Batupele principles. There's 8 principles. Unfortunately, because of time, I won't mention all of them, but that includes consultation. You can't give services unless you've consulted people to know exactly what do they need. You can't give services until you know what their needs are. There's also a principle around redress on complaints. How do you deal with complaints? And of course, value for money. But I just want to go quickly so that in terms of my time, I think the challenges are the major area I wanted to concentrate on. Because of several problems that we have, challenges that we have, the ideas now is that when we move forward, you need to build a professional public service and a capable state. So the focus is there. We're going to be writing quite a number of documents, evaluating how the state has performed up to now, and building a professional state is key. Having processes that are linked to building trust in government to restore people's trust. We're reviewing all the existing government practices and systems to improve the public services capabilities and effectiveness. There will be a focus on skilled and professional public service. There will be a focus also on promoting public participation in policy and decision-making efforts of the state. There will be we're establishing a coordinated public service, on-site service delivery monitoring and support system, which catalyzes frontline service delivery. In particular, and we're not just talking frontline in terms of people who are at the reception desk, but we're talking nurses, we're talking teachers, we're talking social workers, and all of those. Those are defined as frontline staff. So our monitoring is how those people are doing their work, but also how do we encourage them? How do we recognize and reward those that are building, rather that are performing best? That is why we have the Batupele Awards. Every year, nationally, we have Batupele Awards. Batupele means people first. It's a Sotho word, which means people first. So we reward and across the public service. Service Delivery Coordination Unit is a suggestion that is coming up where we're saying it must be located within the presidency at the center of government. That will drive service coordination, service delivery coordination across government, also across the 3 spheres of government, so that municipalities are linked to the provincial government as well as national government, and together we can move forward. Now, you saw a picture there with people, it's the idea of this service delivery unit. The lady there is my minister, Ms. Ayanda Dlodlo. The gentleman next to her is a municipal mayor. The next gentleman there in a colored shirt is a MEC, it's a minister at the provincial level, and this guy is a public servant. So we're combining and coordinating public service coordination across all of government. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting. When we get to the questions, I'm quite keen to know, you've talked about the challenges and the way forward, but you didn't particularly focus on digital, so I'm quite keen to see if we can try and understand that element of it. Okay. Two more presentations to go. So, Rob van Voitswinkel.
Great again.
Is the City Manager and Chief Executive Officer of the City of Arnhem in the Netherlands. Thank you.
Thanks for the introduction, and it's a pleasure for me to be here this afternoon, and it's also a pleasure to tell a little bit more from the perspective of a local government after all the interesting stories of central government. And the story I'm going to tell you is a story of the beautiful city of Arnhem and how we try to connect and work together with our citizens, and also try to put our citizens first again, giving the steering wheel back to the citizens. That's what my story is about. But before I'm going to talk about it, I can imagine that Arnhem and the Netherlands is 2 times small and not known by everybody. So in a nutshell, Arnhem is the 13th largest city of the Netherlands. It has 160,000 inhabitants, and the Netherlands has 7.5 million. So 1% is living in Arnhem. But the greater Arnhem area, it's an daily urban system, has 750,000 people living there. It's only 10 minutes drive from the border of Germany, and it's 45 minutes drive from the capital of Amsterdam. And if you're still not clear where that is, it's also 45 minutes drive away from the best football team of Europe right now. That's Ajax, which is going to play the semi-finals of the Champions League tonight to Tottenham. And I hope on some Saudi Arabian cheers later this evening. Sorry, Kevin, but I hope you don't mind. It's also a city that's known in the Netherlands for leading in electricity and clean mobility. We have our famous trolley bus, totally electric, zero emission in the city. And of course, we will be known or remembered by something that happened in the September days in 1944, when the Allied forces tried to gain all the bridges over the rivers in the Netherlands. And there was one bridge, was the last bridge, the bridge over the River Rhine. Arnhem is located on the Rhine, and it became a bridge too far. We remember that event this year, 75 years ago. To understand the Netherlands a little bit, the cultural context of the Netherlands, it's too long to tell you in detail, but we have a history of tolerance, of open culture. We have a constitution for 117 years. One of the most important pillars in that constitution was the separation of religion and state. Before law in the Netherlands, every religion has the same rights. And the last big change of electoral law was 100 years ago when we granted women voting rights. Once every 4 years, the citizens of Arnhem, they cast a vote for the City Council of Arnhem. That is the political most important body of the government, and it has 39 members. You can see the picture on the sheet. And after the City Council is elected, the City Council negotiates for the Executive Board of Aldermen, which is preceded by the mayor. Big issue in the Netherlands, the mayor is not elected. The mayor is appointed by the Crown. Well, within this context, we think it's only fair that our people in Arnhem is not only casting the votes once every 4 years, but will have an influence on their day-to-day life in the neighborhoods and the districts of the city every day. We have 9 districts, 24 neighborhoods, and we think by doing a lot of management of the districts that giving back the steering wheel to the citizens, make sure that the government is in a position that we can care for our citizens, that we can tap into their ideas, that we can know what their wishes are and realize their wishes of the citizens in the neighborhoods. To make this more clear, I have a small film to show that, how that works. Another tab.
In every district of Arnhem, you'll find a living environment team. The municipality of Arnhem wants to utilise these teams to better connect to the districts and their needs. The teams do not work in the town hall, but in their respective districts. This helps us understand the concerns of residents and businesses. The living environment team manages to budget for their district. We use the input of residents to see what could use more money and where we can save some. Sometimes this will lead to tough decisions but may not please everyone. The distribution of the funds varies per district because every district is unique. We look for opportunities to organise district matters in a smarter way. For example, by avoiding doing the same thing twice or cutting unused activities. We give leeway to our own initiatives and plans of residents. Sometimes by connecting the right people, but sometimes it takes more than that. We do whatever is necessary for the neighbourhood. In doing so, we do not put the rules first, but rather seek for opportunities together. The teams decide on a total of €100 million allocated to the districts. This is a substantial portion of the total budget, which is set by the Arnhem Municipal Council annually. This gives residents more control over their own environment and the opportunity to arrange matters themselves. Are you in? Join the Living Environment team in your district. Together, we ensure that residents of Arnhem can enjoy a pleasant life in their street, neighbourhood and district.
Now probably you ask, why didn't I mention in 6 minutes, not even yet e-government or digital service delivery? Well, it is important, but it starts with the vision that we want the people in our neighborhoods and our districts back on the steering wheel. We transfer to those neighborhoods to find out what their challenges are, what their needs are. We have to, because a lot of decentralized tasks of central government on welfare and on healthcare are within the local government as well in the Netherlands. So that's one important reason. And the second important reason that we start with the vision is that this is our way to bridge the gap between the citizens and the politicians with the government in between. We have to get back the trust, and we give back the trust to the people and the people back to us when we put them on the steering wheel. The second reason is that data is still very important. Data collection, data selection, data polishing, data use and data management. You have to know what is happening in your municipality. You have to know what is happening in your district to be a good government. And the third point I wanted to point out, of course, after that, it is a good thing to deliver the services with maximum ICT if possible, especially for the evil products of us. They should be time efficient, they should be fair, tax payment, paying for your license, that kind of stuff. We do that like in every place. That continues my my story. Thank you for all your attention, and I will gladly answer some questions later on.
Thank you, Rob. Fantastic presentation. Okay, the final presentation of this section, it's from Mohammed Al-Kabti. He is the head of cultural change at the STC Group, Saudi Telecommunications Company.
Bismillah ar-Rahman today with you.
Thank
you. Before I start, actually, I was really confusing a little bit what the right subject I should share with you today. Then I decided myself to share with you a local experience of the culture change driven by value, which is happened in our company, Saudi Telecom Company, STC. And the culture is actually the things that you do inside your organization, the values or the practices that you are doing every day. And today we're gonna show you some facts, some actually experience happened in our company last 7 years. And then universities, we study culture, but when you go to the work, you feel culture, you smell culture, you see culture. Then we really decided in ourselves to be value-driven organization, and to build our values, we should know what is the culture in that time, then what is the desired culture that we want to go to. After that, we decided to build the culture from inside our team, and we used model called the bottom-up model, which is we ask our people to share their feedback about the values that they think is important for us to share and to work in our daily work. If you see here, we build our values, and then we embedded our values by so many actions inside the organizations. Lastly, which is we should measure it. We should measure it and see what is the pain point and how we can fix the issues that we have. And if you see and then they're there, embedding through the values and the behaviors operation system, which is operation system, because culture is touching everything in the whole organization. Why we are changing? We are changing because we want to support the vision of 2030 of our country. At the same time, we want to support and achieve our targets, our strategy target, and also preparing for our technology, because we believe we are the enabler for the digital economy for the country. As you see here, this is our model. I will go fast a little bit because I want to focus on the last slides. This is our model, which is we ask our people to share their feedback about the values that they think is important to be in our daily work. Then we go back to the top team, asking them to select the top 5, because they are the role model, and the key is here. They are the role model, and they should believe in those values, and they should come with us to apply all those actions. Finally, we have just one page for our vision, our values, our behaviors. If you see the first one, which is customer first, that's me. We believe customer first, and we should, all of us, act based on that. It's a journey, it's a changing mindset, changing behavior. That's mean every year we are having initiatives, and in the center of those initiatives, we are focusing on one theme, which is one of our values, and it should be a master plan for almost 5 to 6 years. All the initiatives that you have, it should build each other and work together to achieve your targets. This is very important charter. In every initiative that we have, we are asking different owner from different sector, to bring more power, to bring different perspective, and to help to carry on the whole culture aspects that we are focusing on. This picture is very close to me, because this is the signature inside those pictures actually is from the top team, the CEOs, also the VBs, and they believe in that we are, because when I go to the people asking them to do some actions related to the culture, they have their own priorities, they have their own KPIs, but when they feel it, when they practice it, in the first and second years, everybody really jumping and helping to adopt the new culture. If you see here, I'm going to share with you some names. Dr. Khalid Bayari, he's signing. This is the calendar, the big calendar for the whole year. Everyone should do an actions based on our needs in that year, and also in our assessment, and all the VBs line up actually to sign and to do those actions. Pictures talking, which is the time. This is a lot of pictures that we are doing there, and this is the customer first journey, because putting citizen first, that's mean we should practice our CEOs actually going to the customer premises, going to the customer's home, spend a good time in the call center to feel the customer's actually pain, to live the journey by themselves, I would like go to the like other pictures. And by the way, His Excellency Anif Ban May, he's here with us. He was like one of our team, and I think he's still like one of our customer. And he actually like spent a good time in one of our customers' home, and rest of the team actually spending a good time like in the call center. Even like we are measuring those actions. If you see here, in our values, where is the customer? The customer is always up, always there, always in the top 5. We are also like assessing the values based on the levels that we have. Where is the customer first in terms of the group CEO? Is he implementing and adopting this value or not? And all the level that we have, then the impact that we have going to the customer is really high. Going to the customer, going to the shareholders, even like to our employee. I'm going to end with this slide, which is the lesson learned. It required a lot of commitment from the top team to be a role model, and also like necessary resources and dedicated team, sustain efforts in the years. It's actually 7 years journey, and at the same time like engage your people inside the organization, because they are the one who is important, and they're going to carry all your targets and objectives. Lastly, like you have to have a measure, and this measure like should be benchmark with others globally, and we were using the OHI as a measurement tool. Thank you, and I'm happy like to answer some question like if you are having question in the end. This is very close to me because this is we are like 13 company. I'm sorry, we are 13 company, but we are acting as a one team. We have one direction, we have one value, we have one culture, allowing diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, and congratulations on that. If I can just ask, Mohammed, I heard somebody told me this morning that change program had, when you'd measured staff satisfaction before that, you had something like 20% satisfaction, and afterwards 80%. You'd sort of transformed the mood or something. Is that correct, or had you done some sort of?
Yeah. Actually, like we have very good tool called services like we are providing to our customer, which is MySTC. MySTC actually we have almost like 7 million customers now, and make this services very easy to use, and like our customers can use it anytime, and our satisfaction rate going up. The call centers receiving very positive calls regarding this services, and we are really trying like to push the channel. I mean the digital services, because it's like it's easy for the customer, and also like it's easy for us.
And in your presentation, you made a focus on the the bottom-up input in feeding, involving everybody in the change program. Is that? Do you think that's the key?
Exactly.
Ingredient to the...
We decided like to be value-driven organization. That means the employees playing a very big role here to engage those behaviors, and also the top team, they should implement, and they should be the role model for the whole organizations.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. Okay, so we've only got 10 minutes. We could maybe borrow a couple of extra minutes, but if you have got questions, again, raise your hands. I apologize to the people earlier that I missed. Where is it?
On the front, second row.
Second row, okay. If we can bring the microphone to the second row. I apologize to the people over here who I missed in the last session. It wasn't deliberate, I promise. If you could say your name and your company again, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Saleh Bitish. My question is about culture. Culture is a decisive element on the community behavior. So if we want to shift the culture from a closed culture to an open culture, that will face huge resistance. How do we mitigate this resistance safely and fruitfully? Thank you.
Okay, so this is about resistance to change. I don't know. I guess this is all of you will have an opinion on this. I don't know who wants to go first. Chris, I'll start with you.
So I think, as I mentioned briefly in the presentation, it's very important to have a clear understanding of why you're trying to change the culture in the first instance, and what values, as we just heard from Dr. Mohammed, lie behind that need for change. I think that's very, very important, because if that isn't clear, then people will become confused very quickly, and a lot of resistance stems from confusion, and we have found that being clear. It also helps if you start small, which is something we also heard from Sebastian, I think. So you're not trying to change everything all at once. It's important to build up some momentum and some success, because it helps people's confidence to grow, and that way, even if they are a little confused, they'll still have confidence that you can achieve the things that are the reason you need to change the culture.
Renaud?
Yes, thanks. I mean, I think it's very interesting that that question is coming right now at a time when Saudi Arabia is going through a very, very significant change, right? You have Vision 2030, and that's translating into changes in so many different organizations and institutions up and down the country. So, and so you can ask yourself, what are some of the key ingredients of success for that change process, and or for change processes and changing culture more generally? And I think there are three that we've recognized in the kind of global literature on this. One is the authority. Do you have the authority to change? Is it clear from the top down that it's fine? You can take the risk. You can jump, as you were saying. You know, it's okay to try and to fail. You know, so what is the tone at the top? That's a very important element of the culture. Second, do you have the ability? Do you have the tools to change? Are you being supported in that change? Are things explained clearly? Is it very easy for you? And three, which is the most important and also the most difficult, is acceptance of change. And that acceptance of change is entirely predicated, in my view, on the ability to construct a problem that the change is a response to. If you're able to convince people that there is a problem that matters to them, that is relevant for them, that change is a response to, then they will follow you. They will follow you, and they will follow you gladly, and they will innovate with you. Unless you're able to do that, you will not get them on board.
Okay, fantastic. Hopefully that addresses quite comprehensively your answer there. Rob, if I could... Oh, sorry, Emmanuel, you wanted to say something.
Yes, now I want to just add a few things. Communication is also important. The people that are going to go through that change need to understand not only why, but as you move through the process, the strategy that you're coming up with, you need to constantly communicate the process where you are, so that they can have that buy-in. And as you move along, you're going to realize whether they are changing or are they still resisting, and whether that resistance, where exactly the problems are. So communication is quite important.
In Renaud's comments just now, he said that when you have a clearly identified problem, you can pull people together. On your slides, Emmanuel, you presented a list of challenges,
yes.
You know, economic growth, and there was about 10 other items on there. So it was quite, so in terms of pulling people together to tackle those problems, the bigger the problem, the bigger the change you can deliver, do you think?
Yes, I think people need to understand how big the problem is. Because if they don't understand it, then the resistance is going to be handled in a wrong way. But if they understand the magnitude of the problem, then it's easier to get them on board. In our case, South Africa, when we do, especially after each election phase, there's likely to be changes in government departments. Some are merging, others are unbundled. So the staff need to understand why that's happening. But sometimes it might be a minor.
That's the communication part.
Yes. Yeah. But also the strategy. I think the strategy that you're going to adopt, people need to understand where you're going. Because sometimes they might feel you're doing it because you want to get
will have certain elements of rebellious, right? And to me, I'll never believe that change should be driven from top down, right? I cannot force you to do something that you don't like. But I believe everyone would like to do something their own way. And that is change, right? So that is where we promote a culture where You tell me, what are you unhappy about the way of getting things done today? And what would you want to make it different? And that is where we promote, we cultivate this environment for staff to tell us. And our role as leaders is basically to support. Now, obviously, when they fail, it's okay, continue, because they learn something. And we start by doing small. Having a small team to start to do something, to pilot something that we have not seen before. And over time, it create the viral effect that people do see that change actually brings more good things than negative things.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a question from the front row here. Will this be in Arabic?
Okay. Arabic.
You might need to translation ahead of that.
عبد الله الصليلي معهد كادر السعودية. أنا كنت أتمنى أسمع عن إسعاد الموظفين، كيف نستخدم التقنية في إسعاد الموظفين، جذب عملاء جدد، المدن الرقمية، الأحياء الرقمية، التغيرات التي ستحدث كيف، يعني هل هناك يعني بعض المحاولات فيها، هل هناك تجارب أيضا جيدة ممكن نسمعها؟ شكرا.
Okay, so those are very, very big questions. So, how can we make our employees happier? How can we attract more investment from change?
Maybe
Sebastian, actually, Singapore is a great example. Okay. Yeah. So,
Okay. So, for me, I hire people who want to change, right? And when you have more people in your environment who likes to do things differently, and over time, this behavior will influence one another, and without you knowing that, it becomes a culture.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to say more. Mohammed, Rob, you haven't spoken for a while.
Yes, well, I think there's a lot of similarities between what makes citizens want to change and what makes your employees want to change. They want to be empowered. They want to believe in that the change makes a difference to more success. And
I get that, but the question I wanted to ask you was, you're creating the local community committees. That must have its limitations. I mean, surely to get something done, I mean, if you look at this part of the world where the structures in some of the power structures means that a decision can be made at the top and it's vision-led and things happen fast. Whilst I completely agree with what you've just said about getting the buy-in and the local communities, it must be difficult to get decisions agreed.
Well, there's a technical thing that makes it difficult, and there's a cultural thing that you have to address. I think in the end, citizens want to have influence on day-to-day basis on the place where they live, where they come back from work, usually sometimes work. They want to see it flourishing. It's not as difficult to have them pronounced what they want with a neighborhood, because it's their neighborhood. And if you ask those things without money, it's difficult. If you give them money to make different decisions than the government was used to make, there are going to be changes. We see our neighborhoods differ from each other. Some are growing old. They don't need things for youth anymore. They want other things. And the difficult thing was how to get platforms for collective decision-making, for participatory decision-making. There are a lot of platforms. People are on the platforms, but not for this goal. And that is one thing that cost us most of the time right now. And we're developing a platform, Make Your Neighborhood, actually, right now.
Okay, it sounds incredible. Chris, I said I was interested in procurement when I did my remarks, and both you and Sebastian have touched on this. You made an interesting comment about the development of the SME sector in the UK. You said governments can change markets because they have that buying power. Now, in Saudi Arabia and in Oman and in Abu Dhabi, there's a big push to develop local capacity, local manufacturing, local supply chain, entrepreneurship. Is there a lesson? Did what you said about the UK government driving SME growth, is that something that can be done here?
It absolutely is, because we've already converted the UK digital marketplace into an export model where there are now 6 countries around the world who are creating their own, with the UK government's assistance. They're creating their own instance of the digital marketplace. And so it's designed to do, I think, 3 things. The first is to rationalise usually very confusing rules around public procurement. The second is to energise the small, medium enterprise community to make it clear that government is a potential customer and the overhead associated with bidding for government work will be eliminated. And the third thing is to give government a clear understanding of the impact it is having on the small, medium enterprise community. If you think
is Saudi Arabia one of those countries
that... It is not currently.
Okay, it's interesting. Sorry to cut you off. We're out of time, so we've got a new message. Says keep talking for 5 minutes. Okay, maybe I don't need to cut you off.
2 hours have already gone.
I wanted to go to Sebastian on procurement as well, because you, Sebastian, you're the head of procurement in the health sector in Singapore. We've talked several times today about digital procurement. What's your view on the future of traditional procurement models, public sector procurement models?
Sure, right. So in my perspective, the procurement officer of the future is more of an enterprise leader who manages the business rather than a functional master of procurement. And to become a successful procurement officer, the technical skills are given, but the entrepreneurial skills need to be in focus. And what are these entrepreneurial skills in procurement? I will summarize them into CIPS, because that stands for Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply. And to me, C would stand for challenging convention. I, innovation. P, provoke new thinking. S, solve problem. And these are the entrepreneurial skills that I look at in hiring a procurement officers in my team.
Okay, thank you very much. Mohammed, I wanted to come to you because we talked earlier, you told me about something called Digital Day at STC. Tell me, what is digital? This had some massive transformational effect on your customers, or what was Digital Day?
Actually, our strategy is there, and it helped us actually to take a decision to close all our outlets for one day, and we call it Digital Day. Imagine we have almost like more than 280 stores. We close it for one full day. Why is that? We want our customers to practice the digital channels that we have, to make it usable for them, and to actually get their feedback about those channels that we are providing. The result that we actually received from those interaction with our channels is amazing. The sales go up almost like 500%.
What happened after the Digital Day? Did it go back to normal, or was there a...
For sure, we go back to normal, but at the same time, we want to let everybody to experience ourselves. At the same time, we want to hear from them what is their feedback about our services, to improve it. And the interaction to our services is actually go up almost like 80%. And the positive that we got from them, it's great. I mean, the feedback, it's great. At the same time, they ask us to improve some area, and we are happy to hear that and to improve it too.
Okay, excellent. Well done on that. Emmanuel?
I just want to also talk on the digitization.
Because I noticed that you didn't talk about digital at all in your presentation.
Yes, it's because I was jumping some of the slides. Sorry about that. But we do entertain the digitization. Currently, we are busy formulating a policy. But what is in place is, I would call it still siloized. So different departments, different sectors have got themselves digitized, but we want a system that will link the entire country and various sectors so that sitting in the presidency, the president would have access to all the sectors in the country. One province already that exists, the Western Cape. The DG in the Western Cape can sit and know what's happening, what kind of problems are there in the Western Cape, anywhere in that province. So we are working towards that. But
Okay,
sorry,
so to
just
create a single, a bit like what the UK and
Yes.
I think Singapore talked about, a single marketplace.
That's right.
That's national. Okay, well, officially our time is up, gentlemen. I did want to come to Reno because I thought I wanted to ask about the three change factors in delivering change. I don't know if you can do this in 10 seconds or whatever, but you said you've got to have all three together. What's the key ingredient? So you talked about
ability,
problem-driven,
yeah.
Data, and creativity and innovation. So how can you answer in just a few seconds how you get all three together?
I think the way you get all three together is that you put people first. If you really start by putting yourselves in the shoes of the users of public services, everything else flows from there. So that's what I have to say.
Excellent. Well done. Thank you, everybody. Before I have a message here that I'm going to go to the chairman's summary of the day, so I will do that in just a moment. So I think what we should do is say thank you to our wonderful panelists for this great session. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for our culture change panel. Thank you, gentlemen. Well done. Yeah. Right, am I on? So just to let you know, we're going to now move to a special panel discussion that's going to be a summary of the themes. Now, you're all invited to contribute to this panel, but I'm going to be joined on stage. I think they must be putting their microphones on at the moment, but we're going to be joined on stage by Mohammed Seer, who chaired our first panel this morning from EY, also from Ali Nasser Al-Asiri, who is the Chief Executive of Yesser and who is our host for today, and I think also Kevin from Global Governance Foundation Partners is going to be here as well. He's the organizer of this event. So we're going to bring the three of them on stage and we're going to have a discussion about the standout themes. I want to invite you to add to your to the discussion, because I think what is important is what we do after today, what comes next. We've had a lot of learnings, a lot of knowledge sharing, and it'd be nice to just capture those these findings. So just whilst the guys put their microphones on, we've gone through a lot of ground today. The event is called Putting Citizens First, and the whole narrative has been around designing better public services by putting the customer first, the citizen first, and then harnessing digital technology to do it better, to do it more efficiently and more effectively, so we can be the best governments that we can be. We started off talking about that, and what stood out for me on the first session this morning, the Putting Citizens First, was the statement, I think it was from Jessica from the UK, who talked about, if you get your digital service right, you will get better engagement with the citizens. The citizens will get better service from their government, and you will get better, as government, get better engagement from the citizens. But the key is getting it right. And the line that stood out for me was, governments cannot be lazy. You need to be creative. You need to challenge yourselves and produce invest time and resources as well in effective digital services. In the second session this morning, what was it? We talked about governance, program governance and finance, and that was about breaking down the silos and identifying a common set of goals and structures and being open and communicating with each other to trust, essentially, the distributed decision-making and delivery process. Then we moved on to data. Just after lunch, we had a session on data. That is really the key one that got most animated from people. The importance of collecting as much raw data as possible, but doing it in a structured way and making it as open as possible so that we can get the maximum value in the analytics and the application development. Are we ready to bring people on? And then the final two sessions, we had the technology. We talked a lot about blockchain and other technologies that would bring maximum value from the data and break down some of those silos. And then finally, we've just had an excellent discussion on culture change. How do we enable all this stuff? So let's bring our three panelists onto the show. Welcome back, gentlemen. Right, Ali, if I could start with you. So you started the show today. You gave a keynote presentation about putting citizens first and the importance of digital innovation and e-government. What do you think of what you've heard today? Have you heard what you wanted to hear? And have you heard something new?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. This is a good question to start with because, you know, putting the citizen first is a theme that we want digital government to focus on. And I think GovX, Digital Government Summit that we launched yesterday, the main objective of it is having a purpose in digital for government. I'm happy that we did not discuss that much about artificial intelligence, about blockchain. We mentioned
why are you
blockchain
happy about that? Because I thought that would be the key.
Because we believe that technology is not an objective by itself. It's a channel, it's a medium, it's a tool for us to have a purpose in digital for government. We need these kind of technology to deliver better services for the citizens. We need these services to automate, to operate better with more efficiency within government. So these tools and channels to help us deliver better services to the citizens and help us also operate in a more efficient way.
Okay, thank you. And Mohammed, what has stood out for you? So you excellently moderated the Putting Citizens First panel this morning, the first session, and you've been involved in the formulation of the event. So has it achieved or has it brought out the themes that you expected the event to bring?
Pretty much so. I think, look, the most important thing that came out really as a key theme from the whole day is that the challenge of citizen centricity is too big for governments on their own to solve. It requires cross-border collaboration with governments. It also requires the masses to be mobilized, whether it's citizens themselves, whether it's businesses, it's the educational sector. It's about a collaborative effort. Unless you connect and bring them all together, you're going to make incremental changes. And the other thing most important that came out, and even after the session we were having discussions, the immense amount of interest by every government to contribute to something broader than their own government is what I think is a great takeaway. So there's a lot of interest to collaborate and share beyond any commercial means or needs. So those are two things which really resonated well, I think, in the session this morning. And of course, you've talked about data and other things which are quite critical. How do you manage all of those things? But citizen centricity or citizen will not come first unless we really understand them, number one, and we collaborate, number two.
And Kevin, you're the organizer of this event. I think it's been a fantastic event, so well done. Congratulations. What do you think, where do we go from here? So we've put together a lot of people, we've touched on a lot of themes. How do you think we should take it forward in terms of, do we just have another conference or do we break into more focused streams, or what would work from an event point of view, do you think?
Oh, well, first of all, assalamu alaikum, and we've been absolutely delighted to be involved in what has been a wonderful journey in these last few months to put this together. What's so exciting about the project when it was brought to me was the fact that we were focusing on the citizen. In other words, everything that we do at Global Government Forum is all about supporting civil servants to do their jobs better. And that is about helping each other to learn from each other. You've got all the experience and expertise and the knowledge. It's about helping to facilitate you to learn from one another and really work out what those challenges are. So when we look at this program, it's making sure that it hits the real important points that you guys needed to address, and in order to do that, when you say, okay, we need to put citizens first, and this is it, then you break that down into the elements. What do you need to do in your organizations in order to be able to achieve that outcome? And that's how this agenda came about. And it was wonderful speaking with Mohammed, speaking with Yessa, how much thought and how much emphasis had been put on this topic. So the wonderful expertise and experience and speakers that we had was because of that very well thought through ideal outcome of putting those citizens first. How you take it forward is very much by speaking to the people at the edge of this, at the coalface. What are your challenges? What do you need to learn? Where do you need to learn from? And what do you need to do to be able to achieve this objective? And we have to stay relevant. We have to listen to that. In the same way you have to listen to your citizens, we have to listen to you to make sure that what we bring to you in content, what we facilitate for you, the environments that we create, like an international platform.
Okay, well, let's take it to the floor. So you have the three people who obviously supported by large teams, but the three people who have brought us all together here today. They want to hear what has this been, this was for you, has it been useful, what stood out for you, what feedback can you give to the guys? So if you can raise your hands if you have a point you would like to make, or a question you would like to ask, or a suggestion for how we go forward from here, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone across to you. You might have to also shout because it's quite difficult to see. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Ali have a think about what comments you want to feed back to the floor. So can I come to Saudi Arabia specifically then? So I think a lot of the conversation has been quite thematic. And now in Saudi we have, we heard from NASA, from the Ministry of Health, you know, the privatization element. We've heard Vision 2030 several times. I mentioned the in-kingdom value added program. And then you're delivering the e-government transformation. So much is going on. Of the themes that we saw today, where do you think the biggest challenges will be for the YESA initiative, for the e-government and the GovX initiative to deliver digital transformation? Is it the data? Is it the culture? Is it the platforms? Is it, you know, where do you think we have to push?
Well, you mentioned the top three, you know, that it's kind of either a privilege or an obstacle to digital transformation, which is data, culture, or platforms. But I'm a great believer that every complication comes from culture. If the culture or the people, you know, are within the game, have the right mindset to do the transformation, everything else will be kind of enjoying the journey. So the cultural thing within digital transformation is very important. Digital transformation is a journey, and this journey needs to take its time. People need to know what's the benefits, what's in it for us when we do the digital transformation. I don't want to see the thing that we talked about in the beginning, that we just want to do a technology, digital transformation. It's a citizen digital transformation.
So in the last panel, we heard a lot about that, the bringing people on the journey with us. So have particular things stood out for you today, that you know, think pieces of gold that you can take?
Well, I liked what Sebastian from Singapore said, Control Alt Delete, the concept. But I think we're using it the opposite way. So we start with delete, then alternative, then we control. I think this is the problem. So we start from the right to left, which is we delete, and then we look for alternatives, hoping to control. Whereas Sebastian is saying that we need to control, then look for an alternative, and then start deleting.
I will defend Saudi Arabia on this, because I think what stood out for me, we had it from the city of Arnhem and from Singapore. When you're dealing with a more closely defined entity like a city or a small country, it's a different challenge, I think, to 30 million people. But now, I think, Emmanuel, did you have your hand up just now? I think I saw. Yes, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My comment is on the summit itself, especially to you, Kevin. Well done. This was very successful to me. Highly interactive with lots of information, despite the fact that the time itself was so, yes, the time was not enough. I guess you may need to look into maybe spreading it over 2 days. And probably that will allow, will relieve the facilitator a pressure of having to manage time so strictly that wouldn't allow more debate, especially discussions from the floor. As a panelist, you were deprived a chance of learning from the floor, of getting it from other practitioners from the floor as to how do they do with that. I may tease a little bit on this. When it comes to change management, I think much as in technology, especially on the blockchain part of it, you need to manage the hype. You also need to manage the hype when it comes to change management. Because when change comes, everybody becomes excited. Everybody happens to be a change agent. And come some months, years down the line, you realize nothing has changed.
I wonder if I can come to Mohammed on that. So, as somebody who's worked in different governments, I think we heard today about start small or something. I mean, it's
yes. That's basically my little comment that I can have.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Fantastic.
It was very successful. Thank you.
That's great feedback, great comments. Mohammed.
So I think it comes back to the same thing that quite resonated through the whole day, that technology is a slave to people, not the opposite. So the people is what actually is going to create the change. And unless you have the right mindset and you have the right culture, then that is always going to be a hurdle. And moving that forward is extremely difficult. And I think it was Sebastian, I think from Singapore, who was talking about he hires for culture, not the opposite way. So that's number one, I think, in terms of when you do go about trying to change and you looking to change the mindset, the most important thing that has resonated through the different experiences I've had is how do you make it personal for the individuals who you are looking for being part of this change? What's in it for them? How do we make it connected to them and their reward and recognition somehow so that the motivation is there from there? It's not about someone driving it through a stick. But that's the most important, is getting that alignment. The masses somehow shifting towards wanting something to happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we have a question from the front. If you can say your name and your organization. Oh, it's Professor Obi. Hi.
Sorry, my name's Obi from Japan, and I really enjoyed. And, this forum is more than I expected, especially in terms of the level of Saudi Arabia's digital transformations. And yes, I told you I'm the director of the World e-Government Rankings, and working for every year to evaluate the e-government stages of the each countries. And, I think Saudi Arabia or Middle East as a whole may have more big voice on the digital activities for G20 next year. Yes, you can say digital Saudi Arabia to show the all over the world how the AI, blockchain, or any other new technologies and culture capabilities to be presented. This year, in June, Japan hosts the G20 in Osaka, and next year is Saudi Arabia. And it is really a great opportunity to show the digitals or IoT or big data and new destructive technologies to be demonstrated for all the world leaders. I hope you can make it. Thank you. This is to Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. So GovX, the digital government, the Global Digital Government Summit, will happen in 2020. And as you said, that the G20 events will be moving from Japan to Saudi in 2020. So hopefully next year, when GovX starts, it will be part from the G20 events that are going to happen within Saudi, hosting the G20 countries. So as you said, yes, GovX 2020 is happening, and it will be part from the G20 activities that's going to happen in 2020 in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to bring proceedings, or the formal proceedings, to a close. Thank you, everybody, for fantastic contributions. I particularly want to thank these three gentlemen who've brought us all here together. So, Ali, Kevin, and Mohammed, a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Just to let you know, so I mentioned earlier in the day that we're going to have some ministerial awards. Those are going to happen now. So we did the summary discussion in advance, and now if you can just wait for a few minutes, we're going to put a presentation table on the stage and make some changes to the stage, and then we'll have our networking break. But I just want to say, for me personally, I have loved this. Thank you very much, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Well done. All right. Okay. Thanks, Anne. Well done.
So, great day, and we want to finish this day with recognizing some of the government agencies in Saudi Arabia who have been doing a tremendous job in putting citizens first. Probably we can recognize tens of more, but from a limitation perspective, we have picked 6. Can I invite Vice Minister, His Excellency, to come to the stage to present to the winners of this award? Assalamu alaikum. Good. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. And if you would allow, once we have done the awards, to say a few words, if that's okay with you. And I'm going to call one by one. And if I can request you, when you come, please don't leave the stage, because we would like to take a group photo of all of the 6 with the Vice Minister as well. So first of all, can I call for Ministry of Finance, Itamad platform, and if I can invite Amr al-Zubair and Yassar Fala al-Shamari. Can I call for Watani from Ada, Hassan Jannah, and Amru al-Zubair. And number 3, can I call for Ministry of Justice, the Najaz platform, Engineer Anas Al-Rimi. Next, if I can call for I am Ahmed Al-Bawadi from National Information Center. If I can call for Ministry of Commerce and Investment Miras platform, Ahmed Al-Obashi. And finally, for the National Transformation Program itself, for enabling all of this and a lot more happening, can I call Mansour Al-Rais. Thank you. Great 6 products, if I may call, that have really done something for putting citizens first. If we can have a quick group photo with all 6, with the Vice Minister, His Excellency. If I can have you in the center, Vice Minister, and thank you. Congratulations, every one of you. May I request you to say a few words?
Sure. At the end of the long day, I don't want to give a long speech, so I'm going to start and end with what the moderators just said. Thank you for everybody that contributed to the forum, whether it was through organizing, participating, or even giving feedback. I believe it was a great start. I look forward for next year, 2020, when the forum kicks off. Our vision in Saudi Arabia was all built around the citizen. We hope that this theme cascades and gains momentum on a global level, because governments at the end work for their citizens, and putting them first when designing or implementing or designing a service is what it's all about. Again, thank you very much for your attendance, and hope to see you next year, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well done.